Call.
Chisel. Neal. Olson.
Here.
Luce.
Here.
Zittergruen.
Here.
Hadley.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Okay, is there anybody present who has something to come before the council but is not on the agenda? Seeing none? Consent agenda.
Item A, minutes of the August 15, 2022 regular meeting. Item B, claims. Item C, special permit ATV UTV fall fun ride. Item D, special permit Decorah gear exchange. Item E, amended special permit and parade Decorah Pride. Item F, amendment for Impact Coffee Class C liquor license to include outdoor service. Item G, renewal of special Class C liquor license with Sunday sales for Coriana.
Luce would move acceptance of the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Olson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Luce.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Chisel.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Motion carries. Conduct public hearing on the plans, specifications, form of contract, and taking bids for the Decorah 2022 PC concrete patching project.
You
Have
just
any comments?
open the hearing.
Do you want to open the hearing?
Sure. I'll open the public hearing.
Okay, no written comments received to date. The public hearing for this is required by state law when projects are estimated at this cost. The city issued a notice for bids for concrete road patches throughout the city as part of our street improvements for fiscal '23. Engineer's estimate of the base was $123,313, and an alternate number one of $47,862.50, for a total of $171,175.50. City received two bids. The lowest responsive bid was Skyline Construction with a base bid of $84,002.50, and an alternate number one of $43,988.75, for a total of $127,991.25.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider resolution approving the plans, specifications, form of contract, and awarding the Decorah 2022 PC concrete patching project.
So moved.
Second by Hadley.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Hadley. Any discussion?
I do want to make just one notation for council. Staff does believe that with the low bid, based on the engineer's estimate, that our unit pricing is very aggressive, and so we'd like to reach out to the contractor. While this amount is already slightly above budget for fiscal '23, the unit pricing is very favorable to the city, so we'd like to reach out to the contractor and see if they will change order more work in and hold that unit pricing. So just wanted to make that notation.
But that would come back for future authorization at the same unit price potentially?
If we get change order put together that the contractor is receptive.
Any idea why the variance was so big in between what our estimate was and everybody else?
No, I think it demonstrates to us the difficulty in estimating projects right now. We're very happy, of course, but I think having two bids helps.
Yeah. Is that because of the unknowns and prices of things?
I think just
or-
the fluctuation in material pricing. Usually it's not going down, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's very difficult to be
Okay.
estimating construction work right
Yeah, I
now.
was just curious. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Chisel. Aye. Hadley.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Considering an ordinance repealing ordinance 1037, providing for the division of taxes levied taxable property in the Decorah Business Park Airport Urban Renewal Area, third reading.
Okay, so this is again, second part of terminating the existing urban renewal plan, urban renewal area that was formerly, established in 2001 for the business park and airport. No outstanding debts associated with this area. And again, urban renewal areas are established by ordinance and need to be terminated by such.
Luce would move the third reading for approval.
Second.
Loose motion to approve the third reading, and Zittergruden seconded. Further discussion? Seeing or hearing none, roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Conduct public hearing on proposed designation of the 2022 Business Park Urban Renewal Area. You have a comment before I open the public meeting?
Yes, so you're asking for the written comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the city has received one written comment as well as a requirement of the urban renewal area. This hearing, P&Z did not did not find the urban renewal plan in conformance with the city's comprehensive plan. That vote failed 3-3 with one abstention. So those minutes have been included in the public hearing, as well as one written comment also included in the Dropbox for this hearing.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Seeking none, I'll close the public hearing. Goes to council.
So just for clarity, what we're being asked is to establish an urban renewal area in this particular area so that we then have a negotiated rebate with the developer.
We have the ability to. Items 9, 10, 11, these all three are steps in that process. But yes, ultimately, these are steps to take to authorize the council to enter into a development agreement with a negotiated rebate.
And so if we don't want to offer a rebate, we don't open up the urban renewal area.
You don't have to.
We don't have to.
Again, there are other potential stops to that. The urban renewal area can be established with the plan that authorizes council to, but still there has to be a development agreement entered into to actually provide said rebate.
And with this strategy, we don't outline like, well, we're only going to give rebates if blank, blank, and blank, right? We can do anything, and we just have to say, every time we negotiate the agreement, this is what we want to do, and this is what we are willing to give for a rebate, but we're not just giving a blanket rebate.
Correct. And our rebate even goes, or excuse me, our urban renewal plan even goes into as much detail to say, this is the only one we are considering at this time. So others could have generalities, and this was more common before the state changed the requirements on economic development, urban renewal areas. You might have a generalized $2 million economic development grants through tax rebates and just leave it general. And that then authorizes the council to negotiate individual development agreements within those plan constraints. These plan constraints are even more specific that say it is only this parcel, only this project, and only no more than this dollar amount can be considered.
Are we capturing our costs somehow?
Yes, that you'll notice there's a difference between the potential maximum grant and the amount that's authorizing for collection. Roughly 6,000 or so has been the cost incurred by the city, and then that will be collected through this urban renewal area.
So for item 11, I noticed that there was an attachment from Dorsey and
Dorsey
the
Whitney.
the
Yep.
bond council. That cost and the cost of John and you are all being recovered within that $6,000 in your estimation.
It would be, I would say yes with Dorsey, Whitney, John, Amy, and their team. Mine's going to be a little bit more. I'm salary, so it's a harder argument to make that my costs incurred with this project.
But you were confident that the rest of those costs are covered by that $6,000.
Yes, they should be covered within that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Luce would move to declare necessity and establish urban renewal area pursuant to section 403.4.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Johnson. Any further discussion?
Yeah, a quick.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks.
Steve?
Just a quick question, I think for John. The Planning and Zoning Commission had a duty to determine whether or not this proposed urban renewal area was aligned with Decorah's comprehensive plan. That was their responsibility. That's not something the council is deciding, though. That's accurate?
That's P&Z's, and just to be clear, I haven't really been involved in this because it's been a John, Danos, Dorsey, and Whitney project, which is typical for something like this. But my understanding in the change in the law, it's basically a recommendation from Planning and Zoning to the City Council about this. So you give it whatever weight you find appropriate. And I think the minutes of the P&Z are in the Dropbox to look at.
Right. I mean, I guess reading the minutes, it seems like though they were actually kind of giving their opinion to us on whether or not this aligned with the comprehensive plan, which is not the same as any decision that's before us tonight. I mean,
Yeah.
I could potentially vote in favor of this even if I thought the comprehensive plan wrongly didn't align with this plan. Does that make sense, that question?
Your question makes sense. I can't say the law makes sense, why they have that. And I can't square that with you if that's the next question, why the legislature decided they wanted P&Z to give a recommendation on that, yet when it comes to the council's analysis, I don't know where that factors in at that point.
Well, it's useful to have their advice, but I wonder if this is maybe a sign that the comprehensive plan needs another looking at, which I think is almost certainly true.
From what I read in here, though, I don't think they specified at all what in the comprehensive plan did not agree with what they wanted to do, right?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of discussion from P&Z during the meeting on how the vote went. So, yeah, the minutes don't reflect this is why a no vote was stated, or this is why a yes vote
Why it didn't
was
match the
stated.
comprehensive plan.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, any further
Anna? So,
discussion? Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
So I'm not in favor of continuing rebates unless we're understanding why to an area that we already essentially put infrastructure in for the developers in order for them to find places to come here. So I feel like people are double dipping on our taxes here. So I guess I'm a little sensitive, obviously, to how much money we're actually collecting in taxes off our business park, and feeling like if we keep rebating just because someone asks us, we aren't doing due diligence to our taxpayers in Decorah. So I guess I'm a little curious in terms of, I think that there are reasons we want to use a rebate, but I am thinking that we did this entire process so we could actually think about when and why we do rebates, not blanketing them. And this feels like a blanket rebate once again. And I think we should be more deliberative in how we essentially give up tax dollars.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Sittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Jizzle,
Aye.
Neal,
No.
Olson.
Aye.
Motion carries. Consider an ordinance providing for the division of taxes levied on taxable property in the 2022 Business Park Urban Renewal pursuant to Section 403.19 of the Code of Iowa. And this is the first reading.
Okay, so this is the last step in the urban renewal plan and creation of the urban renewal area. So what this will do is it creates a almost like a fund classification at the county level that as developments happen on this one lot in this scenario, so as that building gets constructed, the additional increment on that lot of property taxes can go towards this fund to finance different debts and obligations in the urban renewal plan, including economic development tax rebates. Levies exempt from this, and this is, I've pointed this out several times with abatement versus rebate discussion. In a tax rebate, levies exempt from collection are the school's instructional support levy, physical plant and equipment levy, and all their debt service levies. So where this is different than abatement is they still have to pay their taxes, but then be eligible for a rebate back of that portion. Whereas on abatement, there's just no valuation increase seen.
Luce would move ordinance providing for division of taxes levied on taxable property in 2022 business plan urban renewal.
Second.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Johnson. Further discussion? Hearing seen none. Roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
And I should note before moving on, Dorsey Whitney did prepare these with a waiving of the second and third. By no means is that an obligation of council. Just wanted to point that out. If council doesn't wish to do that, we can notify Dorsey Whitney and they can change the proceedings.
Noting the vote, I would move to waive second and third and approve.
Second.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Olson to waive the second and third and approve.
Will it cost us less? I see they're on, I'm guessing they're on Zoom right now.
Nope, none of those are actually Dorsey Whitney. So.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Okay.
Just to be clear, this is just setting up the structure for the plan.
Correct. This is setting the urban renewal plan and identifying the area. This isn't even the development agreement yet.
Right.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider resolution setting date of meeting at which it is proposed to approve a development agreement with Skyline Motorsports LLC, including annual appropriation tax increment payments. This is just for setting a public, setting the meeting, correct?
Correct. This is
Okay.
for setting that whole thing is fancy speak from Dorsey Whitney on a public hearing.
And if there are requirements within the development agreement that we want to see met, this is the time that we need to say those.
Correct.
Correct?
As John Anderson has pointed out, you don't set a public hearing unless you do have at least some inclination that you're going to consider this. So knowing that the plan, that's the framework to operate in, as long as it's not exceeding that framework within the urban renewal plan that was just authorized, this can be changed. So what's drafted is and again, this is not approving the development agreement itself. This is setting a public hearing for consideration. But the proposed increment payments are a 3-year sliding scale of 75%, 60%, and 45% of the rebatable taxes. And I know the comment came up about giving tax rebates because others have received them in the area. This is the same scale used for Marshall Electric and Norwegian Mutual. This was discussed it's been probably 6 months when we had the initial abatement versus rebate conversation. That was the scale discussed at that time.
But at this time, we can change those numbers to match whatever we decide we want to want to do, is that correct?
You could.
Okay.
The numbers, even though I guess they could, in theory, exceed the $60,000 mark, but the actual incentives they receive could not be more than 60,000. So let's say council said 100 for 5 years, the plan still only limits it to 60,000.
So they can only get a $60,000 rebate.
Once they hit
That's
that,
that's the most they could be eligible for.
once they hit that
A
threshold,
year
it's
or-
done.
No, total.
Okay, total. So that number, whatever it winds up being, will eventually result, if they get what they want, in a $60,000 rebate.
Correct. That's assuming the valuation of the building is sufficient that 75% of their rebatable taxes, 60% and 45% add up to 60,000.
Well, and we could make it contingent on the fact that the value of their building is set at a certain price.
You don't have to, because it's a rebate back of taxes paid.
Right, but if we wanted to ensure that whatever is built up there had a certain taxable value, this would be one way to do it.
Oh, you could put a minimum
We did
assessment.
that, we did that within
but-
for the Hy-Vee.
Yeah, you can put a minimum assessment value in there.
But this is up to the developer to make sure that their building is such that they're gonna qualify to get this percentage, to get the 60,000 total.
Correct.
And we-
Because if they fall short, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Nope, go ahead.
Because if they do fall short, in theory, the city, so if we have a minimum assessed value agreement in there, interestingly enough, that alone does not bind the assessor to that assessed value. They assess what it is believed to be market rate.
And this would also, were you gonna?
I was just gonna say, and if they fall short, the city could push that you failed to meet your obligations and not finance, or, and not provide the rebate, or, I will say I've never ran into that scenario where they fell short on the valuation. They're just not getting near as much in their rebate.
So I think within the sustainability plan, there is this idea that one of the reasons we're aiming to do this type of work is to pressure building and development with a more sustainable.
Encourage?
Encourage, right? Encourage, right, because they don't have to do this. To think about how do we encourage development to meet some of our sustainability goals? It is one of the reasons that I'm not keen on just offering this all the time, right? If it's just a blanket gift to developers, just like you build a $325,000 house and you get a blanket abatement, my understanding is we're trying to move away from that policy and practice. So this to me seems like we either need to move in that direction and honor what we said in our sustainability plan, or we need to recognize that we have provided a lot of incentive to go there. We've built infrastructure.
How big is this plot? 5 acres? So it'll trigger it'll trigger stormwater. My concern is that, unlike Marceau Electric, which didn't have a physical building within the city of, this does. This is what I would consider a lateral move. I don't know that additional jobs will be created by this.
It does say 3, that they will create 3 additional.
Can we put that in the development agreement and hold them to it in some way?
Yeah, I do think it's in there.
No, in the rebate agreement, can we hold them to that commitment?
So
Yeah,
mean,
they'll
if
certify on an annual basis. They
that-
have to certify.
That the W-2s are,
Usually I'm assuming Carrie collects that data. I would say it's a form they fill out and they certify that this is the payroll they've met or job creation they've met.
Yeah, Emily, I'm very grateful for your sort of attempt to bring some nuance and thought to this, and I certainly, I had my own concerns parallel to Ross's that that there are some benefits, obviously, to new jobs, to new taxable value being created that we're going to capture starting, on year 4 at 100%. I mean, that's not nothing. But I'm also, from in terms of what makes, our city strong, it's infill, not necessarily new development at the edges that really shows financial value in terms of our baked-in infrastructure costs and also the taxable value that's created per acre. And so, I'm obviously concerned, I'm concerned about the sort of building being left behind in town. And so I'm less eager to incentivize something like this than I would be a brand new business coming to town and creating entirely new jobs. I guess I'm not even sure what policy comes out of those thoughts, but I'm grateful for your nuance, and I wonder if, sort of a word. We should definitely, I'll say two quick things. One, this same tool can now not just be used in the Decorah Business Park. This is a tool that we can use to incentivize investment anywhere in our town. Mm-hmm. And I think that we should be ready to do that, not just assume that if you build a new building in the business park, you're getting this kind of incentive, unless we bring that same sort of encouragement to investment everywhere in our town, including the people who next inhabit the building that Decorah Power Sports is vacating, or Skyline Motorsports is vacating. I don't know. It's kind of. I guess I like this use of it, and I want to see it used more widely, not just in the business park.
So,
Okay.
Luce would move to set the public meeting.
October 3rd, correct?
I
Correct.
still think we have to, before we set the public meeting, figure out what we're going to be asking in it. So I,
What
Okay.
building are they vacating? Is this the one on Grant
It's
Street?
off of, is that off of Grant, or off of Short?
It's by KNS, the old KNS building.
so
Okay,
since this is a
just-
lateral move,
Just a minute. So I had a motion made by Luce. Had you seconded that?
seconded that,
Okay,
yes,
then
we
this
set
is,
the public hearing.
then this is discussion.
okay. So since this is a lateral move, not new development, not an incentivization of a new business to come, or anything related to our sustainability goals, how would folks feel, not about a 75, 60, 45, but of a 60, 45, 45? So again, we have leeway here to really think about priorities and what we're trying to do. And yeah, if a new business comes to town that wants to infill in the bowl with the business that's been left behind, and we go then 75, 60, 45, I do think we have to set the precedence of not everybody's going to get the same thing, because there are priorities. There are places we want people to develop and places we don't necessarily want development. That's the role of how we think about a vision for Decorah.
And I think that your point's well taken, but I also think that those are things that we should discuss at a meeting.
This is a meeting.
We have to have that before we set the
Well-
public hearing.
Yeah.
But we have to meet to discuss this with the property owners.
No, we set the parameters, though. I mean, my understanding is we have to set, if we're going to set a public hearing, we have to know what our parameters are going to be.
We can't vote on that tonight, can we, or can we?
So, let me back up to make sure I understand the question correctly. Kirk, you're asking if we can change what the council's willing to consider on the development agreement without Skyline Motorsports consideration.
Correct.
We can, but that doesn't mean that,
We should.
oh, I don't want to go that far. No, that's not, it doesn't mean that they're going to be understanding or agree to those terms.
Correct.
Well,
My
I guess
question-
my apologies, wait, I'm confused. I thought you needed direction in terms of what to work on as a development agreement with the developer to have at the public hearing that we then vote on.
Right, so this was drafted based on, I was looking back at the
Right.
date. I believe it was the first meeting in June, we had a conversation about the structure. And so we used the same as Marceau Electric and Norwegian Mutual based off of that conversation. If council wants to decrease less than that, it still can. To Kirk's question, the council can do that, but that's not to say that Skyline Motorsports agrees to those terms.
And if they don't, what is that? I mean, then we negotiate again, or they don't do the rebate?
in theory, they could stop and not complete any work up there and call it a day. Or no development agreement is reached and they pay.
Isn't the real number that 60,000 though? I mean, if you reduce the percentages, but you still reach that $60,000 threshold, it doesn't make any difference, does it? I mean, we don't know the value, obviously, of the property yet, but.
But if the percentage is decreased, the percentage is decreased, if the assessed value holds the same, then they, in theory, shouldn't reach 60,000 because the percentages are less.
Emily, what was the percentages you suggested?
I think I said 60, 45, 45.
60, 45, 45?
So you're saying the 75, 60, 45, given what they think the assessed value is gonna be of that property, is gonna get you to that $60,000 or ballpark?
It doesn't have to get us to
ballpark
the
of that?
60 though, it's my understanding. It just can't
It doesn't
exceed
have
it.
to,
Right,
that's
it
the
can't exceed
max.
What if, I mean, it could be that 65, 45, 45 gets to 60 just as easily. I guess I'm curious about, if you're gonna change one number, I think you maybe ought to look at changing them both. But I wanna talk about the underlying idea, because I think it's, you know, it's sort of based on a premise that I don't know if I necessarily agree with. And I think the premise is that we should be sort of making different incentive packages based on how well various businesses, meet city goals. And I guess I think that can be done pretty broadly, right? But I don't think it should be done so specifically that developers have no idea what's going to happen. Can I finish though?
Yep.
Thanks. And in particular, I'm basing this on conversations I've had with Decorah Jobs, where they've made it clear that it is a lot easier for them to have these conversations with prospective developers if they can say, there is a consistent tradition in the city where if you're doing new development up in the business park, you're going to get rebates XYZ. Usually, I mean, it's obviously it's always issue to issue. But I'd like going forward for us to somehow make it clear to Decorah Jobs and to other potential developers, what are the things, that we are inclined to do, right? We have to do this, issue by issue, but we should communicate clearly, not after the fact or not like after the proposal's kind of half-baked, but like, hey, we're going to do on average 75, or whatever numbers for traditional development that creates new taxable value in our city, but we're actually going to do even more if it's redevelopment of an existing building, or we're going to do even more if it incorporates sustainability goals. I don't think we should do this kind of after the fact. I think this one's too far down the road. But I would like to see us come up with a schedule of sort of a menu, if you will, of like, this is, if you have 100 low-income housing units that you put on, like, we're going to incentivize the heck out of that. And if you, create 20 jobs on 5 acres, we're going to incentivize that more than if you create 2. I think that's the way to do this, and not just pick arbitrary numbers halfway through the process.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think, 3-year window, a 4-year, in year 4, you're getting 100% of the taxable valuation. That's great.
So when do we and when will we keep I feel like I've been on council for 3 years, and we always talk about how we're going to change our abatements, how we're going to change our rebates, and we have yet to do that. We have yet to hold our feet to the fire, and I get it's no one wants to be the first business that we think about these things. But I guess in my understanding, we started this whole process with the idea that this is what we were going to be doing. Now we're in this process, and we're still not doing it. And that, to me, feels like we're not actually halfway through it. We just committed to doing something that now we're like, oh, well, let's not do it now. So that's why I'm a little frustrated. And where do we start with that? I do think in the last year, I feel like our business park is not being used as we had thought it should be. There have been several instances in which we are losing money at that point. My understanding with the commitment with that business park is it would bring new business to town. This isn't new business. It brought a church. That's not what the intent was. So we keep saying, this is what's going to be here, and I feel like jobs hasn't hurt us, right? I don't know how to be any clearer.
When you're considering that, though, the other fact too is the opportunity. What is the opportunity that has come along where businesses have, I mean, it's hard to get business to come in to be able to work.
That's why I think that if Jobs wants to know what the incentive is, yeah, if you come and create jobs and bring in a new business, it's dramatically increasing tax revenue up there, that's great. Yeah, we'll roll out the red carpet, right? We'll roll out the red carpet if sustainability goals are being met. But to take one business and just relocate it up there isn't meeting our development goals, our sustainability goals, how we want to develop Decorah. And
Well, it is and it's not, because it did trigger the stormwater ordinance, which was something that sustainability did. They'll be displacing they'll be at least retaining or displacing, retaining, right? Bioswale. They'll be retaining the amount of water that they are displacing. So it does meet a sustainability goal just in the fact that we have cooked that into the development process. It will increase our tax base, which does contribute to sustainability indirectly. The point that you make that I think is strongly valid and comes back to the fact that we're not addressing this all the time, and we have asked for how do we work with jobs to position this, because this was triggered by this whole process was triggered by the fact of the advertising, right? The
belief
how
that it
the
was
belief that
eligible
this
for
was canned.
abatement, which
Correct.
is the same structure of Marso and Norwegian Mutual.
So the Emily's point, as far as when do we have the discussion, we're doing the grunt work for the administration portion of it, but when do we really realize our economic development goals, and when do we work with jobs and say, okay, we don't want to incentivize infill, we want to incentivize new households in our community and our schools, because
and
newcomers,
infill in the bowl, right?
yeah,
I mean,
in the bowl within the city, because obviously we don't incentivize the county. So how do we have that discussion? It wasn't cooked into the 2080. It's not clearly defined here, other than an administrative process.
So TIF policies, this gets to kind of Stephen's point before in question. TIF policies, I don't want to call them common necessarily, because the argument behind development agreements are they're individually negotiated. But having a TIF policy that outlines the minimum expectations, I think would be very positive for both the Decorah jobs and the city, that it outlines here's the expectations. It's kind of abatement meets rebate, that we'll negotiate a development agreement with you if you're a business and you come in and bring this to the table. And then above and beyond that, for example, IEDA lists, the classification escapes me, but they're like essential services, if I remember correctly. Hotels are actually listed as one of them, if I remember correctly. Grocery stores, a number of different things are listed in this classification that you can create a separate minimum schedule for that. If you're what IEDA calls an essential service, here's where we'll start. And then meet additional requirements, they can be negotiated on an individual case-by-case basis. It was brought up by a council member that this one might be too late in the game, and there's quite possibly some truth to that. There is a lot of truth to that. The way this thing moved through was it was believed to be an abatement, as the other two properties up there were given. But as we've talked about this process, abatement is you set the rules for an area, you meet the rules, you're given the abatement. But that's not how the city has operated with those two, and even where each individual lot was added to the revitalization area, and the abatement rules considered for each individual lot. So that's where we ended up in this cycle, I believe.
Travis, Emily, I was just going to suggest this as a proposal to allay your concerns about the when do we actually make changes to our abatement policy. I personally think we should proceed as written with this project. I also want to give staff direction to come to us in the next month or maybe 2 months at the most with a proposed schedule of incentives that align with our sustainability goals and align with good fiscal responsible city planning.
Do you want me to take it, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but do you want me to take it to Sustainability Commission? Does Historic Preservation need to weigh in on this?
I don't think that
what steps do I need?
sustainability should be the sole driver of this bus, because I do think that the importance of infill and building on existing infrastructure and investing in where we already have pipes and roads and lights, I guess maybe Sustainability Commission would appreciate that. I just don't necessarily, want sprawl with solar panels, and I guess that's not necessarily strong town building. So
I think that's the other big. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kirsten.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and I had brought this up to you, Travis. I think that's the other big question is we've never really said. In our own minds, we say it. Maybe we've just never had the conversation of is our development priorities sprawl or is our development priority densify the bowls? And when I hear council people talk, it's densify the bowl. And so we need to be very clear.
I'm sorry, what, the bowl?
Densify the bowl, right? And I do think we need to be clearer about we're trying to densify the bowl, or maybe we're not. But we should have those discussions. We should have those discussions with our economic development partners. So this isn't where we sit. I feel bad. I'm not trying to screw anybody here. I'm just trying to hold our feet to the fire to things we said we were going to do that we haven't done, and they just keep coming up. These $300,000 houses, these other businesses that I'm like, wait a minute. I feel like we've already given incentives to get up there, and now we have to keep giving more.
Kirsten?
I'm an advocate for local business, and I think this is a local business that's asking for some assistance to grow a little. Now, they aren't a local business like Toppling Goliath that will, in 7 or 8 or 10 years, employ, 100 people or more. But they are a local business that is thriving, and they are going to add to the taxable valuation. And I'm thinking, why wouldn't we support a local business and a business owner? Why wouldn't we?
Okay, Kirsten?
Number one, I would say it's not only the job creation up there, but it's also job retention. We're not going to lose them to go somewhere else. And secondly, I think Steve's point is well thought out of having staff set up some sort of a table that gives jobs some guidelines as to what they can say to people when they go out there to sell this to people and trying to create, new businesses moving up there and stuff like that. I think that's a really good idea. So.
Mayor, I have just a brief clarification. I want to make sure I'm not being mischaracterized. I wouldn't necessarily say that I think densifying the bowl is the goal of good incentive practice, but I do think continuing to encourage the traditional pattern of investment in this city, which is targeted, in the city, not necessarily at the edges.
I would say, however, that having a work session to talk about what we do want to incentivize and what our guidelines are beyond what the staff sets up as the base would be a good session.
So what I'm hearing is that council is willing to go ahead and set a date, knowing what has been established for this particular company, but also knowing that they want staff to bring forth recommendations for TIF outlines for future projects, and also to be able to discuss that piece amongst not only us, but like economic development and sustainability. Is that correct?
And I really did like Ross's point that the job creation be part of the development agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I do want to point out, it was talked about a lateral move. Sometimes, back up. So when it was noted that this could be perceived as a lateral move because it's an in-town moving just across town, there's a couple things taken into consideration: job growth, retention, taxable value. The value of their current building is $68,960. This structure of 70, 60, 45 with a maximum of 60,000 is on $1 million building.
So I'm looking for a resolution setting the date. That's a public hearing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Resolution setting the date for a public hearing for this.
And you've got a motion and a
Motion
second
and a
already.
second already.
Oh, thank you. I see that in the middle of my red letters. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Chisel, Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Okay, motion carried. Consider pay application number 1 for Decorah 2022 street improvements, asphalt resurfacing. Travis?
Yes, so this is the asphalt side, not can be confused with some of our other projects. This contract was for $573,000 and change. Pay app 1 has been submitted by the contractor for work completed to date, last 5% retainage. City engineers reviewed the application and recommends for approval. Pay app 1 for $82,840.91.
Move approval of pay application 1.
Second?
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Olson. Further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Consider a memorandum of understanding with Lion Energy regarding industrial lane. Travis?
Okay, so this was discussed in utility committee prior, and with John here now, maybe John can help elaborate a little bit on the quitclaim title process. But the city's been approached by Alliant on potential new operations center on recently acquired property, former RC10 building that's adjacent to and bisected by industrial lane. Alliant's wanting to figure out if council has an interest on a potential sale of industrial lane to Alliant so they can center the development on the area as opposed to owning essentially 2 separate lots. Alliant would construct at its cost, as part of this potential sale, Alliant would construct at its cost a new access driveway to the Trout Run trailhead on the north edge of their property, as well as utilities that would need to be rerouted and provide an access easement for the drive. This is where we get into, maybe John can help a bit. When Alliant, we tasked them with, if they wanted to move through this process, they could start with a title opinion on the city's right-of-way there. It turns out apparently it's not actually city right-of-way, but instead some form of easement assigned from the state to Decorah from when the highway ran through there. So we would need to claim ownership of that right-of-way, for lack of a better term, through this quiet title process. And then that takes roughly 6 months, or could take even over that, and cost several $1,000s, of which Alliant would be responsible for reimbursing the city. Again, this is a non-binding MOU, as the very first line reads, but the whole premise behind this is this something council has an interest in pursuing? And before we spend 6+ months and several $1,000s trying to figure out this industrial lane mess, does council have that interest or not?
Make a motion to approve the MOU with Lion Energy regarding industrial lane.
Luce would second.
Motion made by Olson, seconded by Luce. Further discussion?
And just to add, piggyback on what Travis said, there's actually 2 parts to this. The quiet title action is kind of the more, it's messy, but there's a clear statutory process to do it. Assuming nobody really objects to it, you still have to go through the court. After we get through that, assuming we get through that, Alliance asking the city to convey this unused highway right-of-way, because it is prior highway right-of-way. There's additional state procedures to convey it. It's not just an ordinance. We've got to get an appraisal and go through some notice process, and it sounds a little ridiculous, but we have to offer it to the last known owners, which are long dead, and that's and we'll find out who that notice would go to through Alliance Attorney's title opinion and our quiet title action. But I just wanted to make it clear, we get through the quiet title action and we have a second statutory procedure we have to follow.
So the heirs of that property would be who would be offered it to?
Yeah, that's what I foresee that it would be, unless something really surprising comes up. Yeah, and typically you don't find somebody and you publish notice to the last known heirs. I'm guessing this is a Ronin, and you just go through that steps, and they would have an opportunity to buy it if they really wanted to.
And we would sell it to them.
That's right.
Okay. Any other further discussion? Hearing seen none, roll call.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider approval of administrative policy regarding accounts payable workflow flow policy for Old Public Surety Company. Okay, I think I got that out.
So the proposed accounts payable workflow policy, or under our segregation of duties policy, would now require 2 signatures for any checks over $1,000. This is a new requirement of our insurance policy from Old Republic Surety Company for bonding of the city clerk finance officer, which is a state requirement as well.
Hadley will make a motion for approval of the administrative policy.
Neal seconds.
Hadley made motion, Neal seconded. Further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, roll call.
Hadley,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel.
I had a request from Paul Scott to make a comment on the next item, because it's City Council purview. I think it would be best if he does make a comment, that he makes it prior to the discussion and with no discussion going in between. Any other comments? Okay. Paul, you want to come up to the...
I would suggest that one of the side effects of having city council work sessions, as opposed to the old system of having city committees with particular assignments and given responsibility to review items, is that sometimes background research isn't done, as perhaps it was not done in this item here. I'd suggest that the proposed public records request policy was placed in the City Council Dropbox Friday afternoon. It would go into effect immediately if it's approved this evening. I would ask, do we know what public records request policies are in nearby communities like Waukon, West Union, Cresco, and New Hampton, or for that matter in communities similar to Decorah, such as Waverly, Pella, or Storm Lake? What charges do other communities enforce for copying? What are those policies? As a matter of fact, the Iowa League of Cities has publications about open records requests, and they are updated to include Senate File 2322, which was passed earlier this year by the Iowa legislature. It's good to have a policy about the use of public records, but a schedule which saw the policy released on the Friday afternoon of Labor Day weekend is not the way to make sure that the City of Decorah's public records policy is the proper one. I would ask the City Council to take the time to do this right.
Thank you. Okay. Item is to consider administrative policy regarding public records request. Travis, do you have any Anything you want to state on that?
Sure. So the city has followed state code when public records requests have been made, but the city doesn't have a formal policy. As noted from the previous comment, it is good practice to have a policy that says you're going to follow state code. And, I would add that this formal policy helps future expectations when requests are made, because not everyone has a level of understanding of what public records are. And so this policy helps as a guide for those that don't have that understanding. And so this proposed administrative policy was drafted by the city attorney in conformance with state code, the most recent revisions. And since I've been here, there's been 2 Freedom of Information Act requests been made by the same individual. And I actually brought in that individual to review this draft policy and get their thoughts on it. And they pointed out, like on the fee schedule, what about digital media? So if they bring in a flash drive, there's no cost associated with that. These are supposed to be costs incurred to the city. So a digital is free.
I would recommend that we never plug any USB from outside our organization into any computer.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You trying to tell me my
And
firewall's
I
not
would
strong
like to have
enough?
that written into a policy somewhere. That
There must be a way that it happens only because the auditor's office does that. So if it's a similar.
no, I'm not joking.
No, I get that, but there must be something because the state of Iowa does that with marriage. I mean, any record you bring, you can bring in a digital device and they will let you have it. So there must be some mechanism to do that.
I'm
Or
sure there
email
is,
it to
but-
them. I mean, if they want it digitally, give it to them digitally.
Yeah.
You don't even have to have a USB port.
The last request we fulfilled, that's what we did, was emailed the documents to them.
Yeah. And so then they're just charged staff time.
Correct.
Is this policy pretty much in line with other cities and what the rest of the state has been doing? Similar? Or don't we know?
I did a little bit of looking, and yes, I rarely do I start from whole cloth.
Right.
I look at other places. I'd also tell you a lot of small towns just don't have a written policy, and when you need it, it's too late. And that's why. And if you don't like the prices in here, adjust them. And I would point out in here, and this is from state code, the first 30 minutes are free that it takes to look for a record. And I think this, as Travis noted, this was prompted by some requests, which people are by all means totally allowed to make, but it takes a lot of staff time. And if nothing else, it might help the requester narrow down their search instead of saying, I want all correspondence from all city council members for the last 5 years. Well, and with it in the age of email, and I'm guilty of this myself, I'll send an email with one sentence on. Well, I sent 3 today to Travis in about 5 minutes. I was like, oh, I forgot this. You got to look for each one of those. So anyways, that's kind of the impetus behind it.
And to Paul's point, I guess I'm looking through the committees. Paul, did you have a specific committee that you'd recommend? Because economic and property, community betterment, budget and finance, public safety don't really fit administrative policies. There's not a committee. Did you have a specific committee that you would recommend rather than a work session?
My overall question to the council was, has the council discussed this?
Oh, but you did specify committees, and I was just wondering if you had a committee that you thought it should go to versus a work session.
In the past, when it got referred to a 3-member committee of the city council, that was the technique that would be used to make sure that city council members had researched.
Well, the committees are 4.
I mean, I think we are discussing it. I mean, I think
Right.
it's a little presumptuous to assume that council doesn't do their research when they get something. And if I felt, at least I'll speak for myself, if I looked at something and I thought to myself, wow, I need more time to review this and I do have questions, we have in council meeting directed staff to say, we want comparables. I actually think that this is a better method because the whole council is discussing this policy right now. We're not approving it yet. If we have significant discussion that comes up that raises red flags, I think you can be assured that we would table it and ask direct staff.
I haven't seen this listed on a work session.
But
When
we're
I-
not
when-
using that format.
When I looked into this, just to discuss this policy, when I looked into this over the weekend, I did find some comparables that, you know, make it seem like charging for staff time and no charge for digital media was fairly reasonable. It also sort of makes sense past a certain point. We want our staff to be working for our city and not necessarily being free research agents for people whose interests may or may not perfectly align with the city. So I went and I talked to Travis about this today to ask about comparables and also to kind of gauge city staff's inclination to assist with these kinds of important records requests, because we have also a compelling duty not just to protect the city's investment in its staff, but we have a pretty compelling interest to make sure that we're doing business above board and in a way that's open to the media. And so I wanted to ensure that we weren't using this to stonewall or to restrict the media's very pertinent interest in knowing what's going on. And frankly, I want to be as open as possible with the media because I think we do things by the book as a city, and I feel like the more openness that we engage in, I think the better for all parties. But I think that when our complying with the important duty to provide our records to interested parties becomes cost prohibitive to the city, then that's not fair to put on the taxpayer's shoulders. So I think this is appropriate because it will also help people making requests to appropriately target the scope of their request to the information they need. It puts a price on it. And that's important because our staff's time is very valuable. That said, I did notice at the end of this proposed policy that it encourages, or that it allows for staff to waive the fees when they felt that the records request was in the public interest. And I guess I'm just going to say this as my out loud encouragement to be liberal with that policy, because I think we should err on the side of sharing our records. However, if requests become so frequent or so wide in scope as to distract us from the work that we're supposed to be doing, that's when I think it's useful to have this policy.
I think, I guess my question to the council is level of comfort with the policy that was brought forth by staff, and then direction if not, and you want to discuss it more.
Carrie, are you okay with it?
Yes, I am, especially with because some of the requests we had are very simple. The 30 minutes is free, and I think that's fair. But beyond that, it can really eat up your time, and it hurts on your priorities, so I agree with it.
Luce would move the public records request policy for approval.
Second.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Olson. Further discussion? I'm sorry. But
Well, I felt like they were addressed. I'm sorry. So digital, we addressed black and white and color pages if they're scanned. I think that's been addressed in the policy. If requests are made to review document in person, is there no copying? What's the fee? I assume it's no copying, no fee.
Right.
Yeah, so just staff time. So if they're going to come and ask for certain documentation and Carrie can pull it up in 30 minutes, I think she'll give it to them and they can address it. If it's going to take 4 hours to pull together what someone wants to come and see, like our budget, anybody can come and see our budget. So.
any other further questions from the council? And are you willing to entertain any questions from
No.
staff? Okay.
I will say, Emily, you did not answer my question.
Kate, it's not a public hearing. Right?
I know you're not taking it, but I will say you did not answer my questions.
No, don't, just.
Okay. You may want to check that you didn't answer after we vote.
I have them right here. I looked through them as we were going.
It's pretty clear, so. Okay. Roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider an ordinance amending section 17.16.135, 17.68.030, and 1780.03 related to fence requirements, and this is a second reading.
All right, so a couple of changes with these code sections. One being adding for definition of a decorative fence and decorative structure to assist with clarification of these items permitted in the right-of-way, to saying being less than 24 inches. Living fence was also added to separate their requirements from a fence under current ordinance. A living fence, so if I plant a row of shrubs, hedges, in a fashion of a fence, under today's code, I would need to pull a permit for that. We added this definition, and then the living fence would still be subject to the fence requirements, however, not require a permit to be pulled and then be inspected. Let's see. Also added, a setback for fences adjacent to alleys at 5 foot, aligning with accessory structure setback requirements, and added language treating an alley as a street intersection to help maintain line of sight requirements. The fences would not exceed 4 feet for a minimum of 10 feet from that intersection. Rest of proposed languages are to clean up, rest of proposed changes are to clean up language and created a table as opposed to just paragraph form, but keep the existing requirements. Diagrams in the pack to help illustrate the different examples.
Have you had any feedback on this since the first reading?
I have not. Has any other staff?
Hadley, make a motion to approve the second reading.
Luce would second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Luce to approve the second reading. Any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none. Roll call?
Hadley,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
I'd move to waive the third and wait and approve.
I second.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Neal to waive the third and approve. Any discussion? Roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Okay, consider an ordinance amending chapters 17.08 and 17.52 related to loading and parking space requirements. Second reading.
Okay, so this was a large-scale review of our existing minimum parking requirements. The ordinance as it exists today is all spelled out in paragraph form. So this did convert everything to a table format, believed to be easier to read and interpret. SUDAS, International Building Code, as well as the existing code were all considered during staff review, where typically the lesser of the three in the proposed are in the proposed ordinance. Also adds language meeting ADA requirements and referring to SUDAS for design criteria of parking lots and stalls. P&Z has reviewed the ordinance and recommends approval.
Is there any feedback?
I have not. Staff?
I had one letter, just to reiterate, I think I brought it up the first time, but this isn't changing the C3 parking minimums because there were no C3 parking minimums.
Correct.
Thank you.
Hadley, I make a motion to approve the second reading.
Second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Olson to approve the second reading. Discussion?
Just to,
Sorry.
sorry, I should be quicker.
That's
No, I'm
okay.
kidding.
That's
Just to reiterate that my opposition is due to my belief that these parking minimums don't go far enough in reducing parking minimums. We shouldn't have as many as even this new code calls for, but I applaud the reductions that are present in them.
Thank you. Roll call?
Hadley,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye. Nay.
Motion carried. All right. Consider an ordinance amending section 8.44.030 and 8.44.040 and 8.44.050 related to yard waste disposal. First reading. Travis?
The main reason for the proposed ordinance is a result of the city purchasing the leaf vac to provide more efficient curbside collection of leaves. The revisions include prohibiting the previous practice of putting all your leaves into the gutter line and we'd come by and pick them up with the front end loader. Now that we've got the vac, the best place for those is on the back of the curb in the boulevard. This will help keep leaves out of storm sewers, plugging up intakes. So our code tells people you can put them in there during leaf collection. This proposed ordinance would strike that. There is still a provision in there that allows for special permissions to deviate when requested in writing because of a hardship. There may be a handful of properties in town where maybe the boulevard's like this, and so it's not exactly feasible. But let's see here.
Is there a fee-
Also,
Is there a fee associated?
no. Also, some small minor changes based on previous improvements to equipment that our code still said that branches, logs weren't allowed to be longer than 4 feet or 6 feet. We can actually handle up to 12 feet out at the yard waste site. And this also allows the street superintendent to establish temporary sites after a storm. And again, this also beefs up prohibition sections to help us deal with illegal dumping and material from outside the city being brought into the yard waste site.
Hadley will make a motion approving the proposed ordinance as stated.
Luce would second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Luce. Any further discussion?
Jeremy, just for clarification purposes, what is your advice for like my block there, the 700 block of West Main, where we have all hillside and then our condos have all driveway in front like that?
You don't have any leaves then?
Oh, we wish we didn't have any leaves. They all blow onto our property.
I
But
think, as Travis mentioned, those are the situations where we would need to have a conversation. I believe the code specifies that if approved by the street superintendent, those could be placed in the street. But we'd want to have a conversation so that we can pick them up as quickly as possible, so they're
Right.
not sitting there.
because I'm going to get riddled with questions from them by
Yep.
immediately upon this being done. Just out of curiosity, what would be your thought on it? Where,
For your location,
Yeah,
I'd say they'd have to go either on the edge of the driveway or in the street. So we'd have to look at it. It's going to be a case by case.
right, but it's going to be the whole block there. Because the one side is too steep, they're not going to be able to put on their boulevard. And then we don't have a boulevard where we're at.
Yeah, in that case, it'd almost have to go in the street.
Okay.
There will definitely be education involved in this, but it's the fact that we have the leaf technology, I think, the leaf pulling technology, but I don't think we have to get granular tonight as far as,
Well, I do because I'm going to get pummeled with questions.
right.
Well, it is the
Yeah,
first.
But
That's why I'm just-
we already bought the leaf vacuum,
Right.
so.
No, that's
yeah.
fine, but I'm just,
Plus, it's the
Move we all
first
help
year.
pummel.
Okay.
I would suggest this would be a great use of our technology when we do hopefully get it up really soon, right? Leaves don't go on the curb. In the same way that I hope that technology is up and going for our snow removal plan, but I think this is an excellent time to increase public communication
Yep.
and testing out our little text thing.
Okay, we've had a motion, second, and discussion.
I just have one more question for Jeremy.
Okay.
How often are you planning on getting around to the neighborhoods if they're gonna be piled and blowing back into yards or killing grass if they're there too long?
That's a great question, and I don't have the answer right now. We really need to see how long it takes. We're hoping that it's a similar time frame to what we've done in the past, where we'll specify a schedule for what wards we'll be in and when we'll be in those wards.
Again, excellent text communication.
Okay. Roll call.
Hadley,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
aye.
Zittergrun.
Aye.
I mean, that's just the first reading, correct? I know that's just the first
Correct.
reading. Okay.
Yeah, probably just for public comment.
Discussion and possible action regarding the Decorah Senior Hospitality. Is that Hospitality, how about that, Center?
Okay, so the Decorah Senior Hospitality Center Group has asked the council to discuss their initial request of city involvement. City held a work session, toured the facility. We did have a subsequent inspection. He did have Greg go take a look at the building. To refresh everyone's memory, couple, we'll say 3 different options, but there's any number of points the city could become involved. One being on the far end of the spectrum, no involvement whatsoever. Thank you, we appreciate you. The other end being full-blown, now it's a city, all under the city's organization, ownership, and becomes a part of the city. And then in the middle, there could be the potential for any combination of things, such as city-owned, lease back the facility and the operations, in which case that, under ownership, we would insure the building. And we did get some numbers on insurance there. That would be an additional $500 a year to the city on our insurance costs, whereas the policy for the senior citizens, I believe on their structure is $3,000, if I remember correctly. But they would still have to get another separate policy on their operations within, and the city additionally insured, and that was going to cost them roughly $500. So net about a $2,000 assistance to them on an annual basis. There could be, again, somewhere in the middle where the city owns, maintains, but leases back the operations within the building. That's going to be more cost on the city side of owning and maintaining said building, but the group still operates independently within the building. That's where, with Greg's inspection, structurally, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Greg, or if I paraphrase incorrectly, structurally speaking, sound building, no concerns on it falling over by any means. We all did tour the facility, and as identified by this senior hospitality group, they're trying to fundraise to make improvements within. It's dated, it has some issues with inside. The sanitary service line was brought up during that inspection, and so that is a more costly venture on the city side for maintaining that building. There are, as noted during the budget process, the city council can opt for a very specific levy on civic centers that gets outside of the 810 levy, and we can utilize that individual levy, but it does mean a property tax increase for everyone in Decorah to utilize that one. It can be done either on the ownership of or the rental. Those are, again, 2 separate levies. That kind of
Hadley will make a motion to table and refer to the budget committee because it's too vast of a discussion point. There are too many options, and I don't feel without having modeling as far as the financial impact outside of a budget time. We haven't allocated money for this. We don't have a 2080. I would propose that we table any action or discussion, refer to committee, and bring it back.
Just a minute. Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Chisel. One question I have, will you remind me again how much the city included in our budget this year for the senior center? $12,000. Thank you. Okay, Emily?
No, I was gonna suggest, I don't mind tabling to the budget committee, but I would like to give staff direction so that we don't wind up at the budget committee and then just saying we want this, this, and this. We could have done that right now and moved forward, right? I think the senior center is legitimately waiting on us to make some decision. So all I'm asking is that maybe we could come up with, can you model for us the costs to the city under A, B, and C, and we can talk about it at a budget meeting?
At a budget meeting, yeah.
Yeah, are you okay? So I guess my suggestion would be, can you model, I'm sort of interested in the medium plans, right? Can you model what it looks like if we own the building, lease back, or if we own the building, lease back operations? That would be what I would like to see happening.
I'd also like to see the levy for a city-owned civic center. A 2 cents, how much is that, type of knowing
Oh, good call.
how much levy would generate to support as part of that work session.
The only other
But it's a
piece of
committee.
information I would find helpful would be the appraised value of the building. If there is an appraisal, and if not, a reasonable guess would be fine for me. I don't think paying for an appraisal makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess I would like to see a little more robust plan on what kind of capital funds the group themselves are planning to raise privately, and what improvements they want to see. I don't know that the city is prepared to just take over a building without a little more public participation.
Does staff have enough to go on as far as for being able to take it to a committee? I guess it's the budget committee.
With the concept of A, B, and C, modeling A, B, and C, is everyone wanting in the middle? Is that what I'm getting?
Yes?
I would say I'm a big fan of silence as affirmation.
Can we schedule that budget committee? How much time do you need, Travis, to pull that together?
Considering the upcoming schedule
would
for
say-
September.
I mean, my guess is that the senior center is gonna have a hard time figuring out their capital campaign if they don't actually know what the role the city's going to play in, right? So that,
We're outside of budget anyway, so we can't.
no, I get that, but they can't really move ahead with the numbers we're asking them to get.
Yeah, that-
I would say short of, if we're not looking at, and next week's way too fast to turn around, as the mayor indicated, the end of this month gets really full. Iowa League of Cities, as well as ICMA, which I have to do for my credentialed manager. So we're looking at into October, if you're
So
wanting
can
me to
we-
model stuff.
Can we go to first week in October meeting for budget? Randy, you set the budget meeting, so that work?
I'll have to look at my calendar here.
Well, I would make a recommendation that we try to handle this in the first week of October.
And then perhaps Travis and Randy can pull together what would be feasible to be able to get the appropriate amount of information for us, considering the activities that are in between now and then.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call?
Hadley,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Sittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Discussion on potential improvements to College Drive.
Okay, so based on last Monday's work session on the traffic impact study with Quickstar, there were two options essentially presented. The results of the traffic impact study were that a left turn lane for southbound traffic on College Drive would be required. So there were two options presented by Bolton and Bank to meet that. One is option A, or you got B up there? Okay, you want to talk them backwards? Okay, so option B that was presented from Bolton and Bank includes using a designated left turn lane for southbound traffic on College on the innermost existing lane, and then then after you get south past Quarry, it going back into its existing two-lane structure. And then conversely, on the northbound traffic on College would be a right turn only for the right lane as you approach Quarry. And then once you get past Quarry, it would then go into, again, existing traffic with two lanes. Take it away, Jeremy.
Jeremy, just so I pull it out, we're looking at 20B, right? That's what you want to talk about
Yeah,
first?
and I apologize for not getting this put together sooner. Our week last week got a little bit busy.
Do you have your
but
microphone on?
I think so. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so this is option B on Dropbox, and I wanted to talk about this one first just because it's a little more à la carte, whereas option A with the road diet kind of combines all of these into one. But this is very colorful for a couple of reasons. We did put some very rough, and I'd like to emphasize rough, cost estimates together for each of these different options. So as Travis indicated, the first one, which is in this pink or magenta, is a new left turn lane on College Drive. That's based on the traffic study, what was determined to be warranted based on the proposed Quick Star. So that's what you see in that magenta color there. That cost primarily is paint, actually it's just addition of paint with some traffic control. Really that could be accomplished relatively easily. If we were to look at a new crosswalk on College Drive at Quarry, so that's the blue that you see there. This includes, this price, I should say, includes the raised refuge island with the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, the paint necessary, as well as some improvements to the sidewalk on either end to make it ADA accessible. It is a solar-powered RRFB, just for side note there. And then project, we just kind of called project number 3, again, perhaps independent of the project, the proposed project, is a right turn lane and essentially a bump out on the north side of Quarry. Again, mostly paint to accomplish that. So that's why we tried to separate these out. Some of these could be accomplished regardless of what happens at this intersection here in regards to development. And then lastly, we did look at some improvements to the Quarry the College and Locust / North Street intersection, which is this lighter blue. Again, this price that we put together does include a raised refuge island. The crosswalk is actually not in great alignment right now, so we'd propose to add a little bump out on North Street to realign that, to square it up with, to have a better crossing through that intersection. So the other thing you see on this is the orange sidewalk, proposed alignment of the sidewalk, and then superimposed is the submitted Quick Star plan and kind of that black there. And I can zoom out, but I just wanted, like I said, wanted to kind of do this quote unquote a la carte option first. You could do any number of these together. Very rough costs. We added 20% contingency to each. As we get some direction from or interest from council, we'd look to refine not only these concepts but the pricing as well. So does that kind of make sense what we're showing? Any questions I could answer?
And then you'd continue 4 lanes down south of that bump out?
Yeah, really
Quarry?
south of
Quarry Street there?
yeah, south of this half block of Quarry Street, it's what you see today. We're not proposing any changes south of that Quarry and College intersection in this example.
Is that, so that green bump out at Quarry Street, essentially you'd have that curb there, but you would just paint a like, don't be here area?
That is what the price estimate is for, is just paint. We may look at some vertical elements to that just to make it a little bit easier when we're making a change like this. But as we did at on Fifth Avenue, we could do our rubber curb, we could do the reflective posts as we are making these changes. But yes, right now we just assumed some paint.
And
So-
that, sorry.
I was gonna say, so with that design there, you wouldn't have a crosswalk at Iowa Avenue, across College Drive?
That's correct. We just picked one location for a crosswalk
Okay,
for right
yep.
now. If there is a desire for a second one,
Right.
we could look into that. But really for these 4-lane crossings, as Bolton and Mink noted, a refuge island is necessary.
Right.
And that turn lane onto Quarry is where the Bolton and Mink had recommended that the developer actually kick in some costs.
That would be what's in the pink. The southbound left turn lane is what came out of the traffic study as warranted, is the word they use,
Yep.
based on the proposed development. So just in pink, that's why we separated that out. The blue is what Quick Star has committed to helping with, is some kind of lighted intersection in blue. So pink and blue are really kind of related in our minds to the development. Everything else, I guess, is up for debate on that, but these are the two that came out of the study.
Carrie, do you know what we have left in the franchise, the streets % portion of the Alliant franchise fees?
All of it.
We have all of it left?
Yeah, we haven't used any of that.
Jeremy, would you recommend, just because this is unbudgeted, right? I mean, this is improvements that are not part of the street plans or whatnot. Do you think this would be good use of that fund balance? Or some of those funds?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're kind of grouping that with lost, they're those funds in a sense for any street-related improvements. So yes would be the short answer.
I think there's a decent argument to be made that we wouldn't be considering the enhancements in green at all without this proposal from Quickstar. I mean, the increased traffic onto and off of Quarry Street is why we're having that discussion at all. And so I would think that if this is the plan we proceed with, it would be very reasonable to ask them to cover that section of costs as well. And if the eventual goal would be to have that hashed section have vertical elements, I think that should be part of what we ask from Quickstar, that we just pour curb and put in some green elements or whatever. And then I had a question also, Jeremy. In the sidewalk on their site plan, as you have it laid out here in orange, I'm curious, is there room in the right-of-way for there to be a more intuitive connection from where it crosses College Drive from the west onto the sidewalk along Quarry? I guess what I'm saying is, as you make that crossing, could you make that a triangular intersection at the sidewalk? Does that question make sense?
Are you talking about right here?
At Quarry?
Yeah, right there. I'm just wondering about, you cross that, and I think you want to naturally lead pedestrians who plan to go straight down Quarry or who want to approach Quickstar from the side. Is there a way to ensure that their site plan has, it's not intuitive, you know what I mean? We would never design a road where if you tended to get from here to there, you took a short turn for 10 feet, because that wouldn't make sense to drivers. And the same kinds of things I think are true for, people walking. So
yeah, a good question. Our challenges right now are we're working between the property corner, which is this, and then a utility pole, which is here. So to do, I think what you're saying, which would be kind of like angle like this, maybe.
Yeah.
That would require an easement onto their property, most likely, because of this utility pole here in the corner makes it difficult. We either got to go around this way, closer to the back of the curb, or as we have shown. We could certainly cut the corner a little bit here, but this black line, if you can see my cursor, is the property line.
Well, if you think it would make the sidewalk connection more intuitive, I think it's worth getting the easement. I mean, we certainly have leverage, and that would not be a big ticket item to ask for, nor would it be much of a imposition on their site plan. I think right now that's probably going to be red mulched landscaping.
Now, are the
Looking at
the
that,
utility poles you talk about, are those lights poles, or are those the existing, wooden poles that have all that electrical
I
clutter?
think this is a three-phase electric, three-phase power pole, because it's buried three-phase along Quarry. I'd have to confirm that to be sure, but it's a large pole. When we asked about
What are the
undergrounding-
possibilities of getting all those things buried?
Yeah.
You seem
Sorry. I missed it, I'm sorry.
No, so it's good to reiterate here. So we did ask that question because if you see this is the proposed drive onto College. This is an existing pole right here, right in the middle. So that pole needs to be removed based on the current site, or not removed, relocated. So with that, we did ask what it would take to underground essentially everything from this pole. It will get moved straight south from this point to this pole. This pole would need to stay. So this pole in the middle by the kind of nearest the old subway could be removed. So I said this is feasible. What we don't have yet is the price to do that.
Okay.
It won't be free. It would be potentially developer or city or some combination thereof if there was a desire to underground, but it is feasible.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification. When you're looking at going from 4-lane to 3-lane, is this only between Locust Road and Quarry Street? It's not you're not considering going from Locust Road over to the bridge?
So for option A, which is the road diet, the 4-to-3 conversion, we are looking at from Locust, and we'll get to that here if there are no
Okay.
more questions. That's
Okay.
option A. I wanted, like I said, sorry, I
No,
wanted to do
that's
this one
okay.
first, just because it's a little bit of a more
That's okay.
piecemeal. But for option A, which is the road diet, it'd be from Locust to the bridge.
Okay, thank you.
In that intersection right there with Quarry Street and College, are you proposing like a right-hand turn only from Quarry Street onto College?
We are not, because of the bump out there providing additional visibility.
Is that going to create a problem for pedestrians at that crosswalk there? Because you're going to actually have to pull across the crosswalk
Yeah,
to be able to see around that corner for
It's
the.
a problem today, right? I mean, it happens today. I think actually by providing this bump out, you can almost pull beyond it. It's not ideal, but I think it would be an improvement. So yeah, that's going to be a challenging crosswalk. It's either that or we try to move the crosswalk back again. But for ADA it was, compliance, it was much more feasible to put it where it is today. So yeah, I mean, this isn't a
Right.
perfect plan, right? But
But if that
we're
bump
trying
out
to-
was actually curb and concrete,
Sorry. say
if that green area was actually curb and concrete, you could make a crosswalk essentially from that curb and concrete, right?
It depends where you want, I mean, it depends where we think cars are gonna queue up when they're coming out on this intersection. I mean, if we're gonna look to have their crosswalk where it was prior, although it wasn't ADA compliant, it would be kind of in the middle of this bump out. If a car is still coming up this far, you probably still have the same issue. It's just kind of the nature of trying to shoehorn some of these into an existing.
Yeah, and I think the closer you move that crosswalk to College Drive, the more you're exposing users of it to traffic turning east onto Quarry from College, from you know, that is, you know, they have less time to react to a car that turns without bothering to look for people in the crosswalk.
Yeah, with that retaining wall there, I'm not sure we can make that north side ADA compliant, which is the reason it got tucked around the corner. But something we can look at.
Right. Thanks, Jeremy.
If there's nothing else on this one, I'll go to option A, which is the road diet. So actually it extends onto the bridge to transition from 4 lanes to 3. So this, yeah, I mean, in simplest terms, it's we're eliminating one of the lanes here. So this particular concept is centering the center lane in the middle of the road. There is an option to potentially look at shifting it to one side or the other, depending on what the proposed use would be for the space that we gain. A couple things to note on this: we just started with this is the light edition. Primarily just paint. There would be some ADA sidewalk improvements. The price that you see there does not include the RFB at this crossing, but we can add that in. It also does not include refuge islands at either of the two intersections as was presented prior. For 3 lanes, they're not required. If it's something that is desired, we can fit those in. But this would be the most, I guess, from our perspective, the most basic setup for a road diet. It is a little challenging. That's why this took some time, is because it's not so simple as to just put a lane down the middle. With all these drives at various distances, various setbacks from intersections, we tried to accommodate the best we could, providing for some queuing up space when folks are turning into these different access drives. And at intersections, having designated turn lanes like you would see on a short street. So this would go all the way, like I said, onto the bridge to start that 3-lane.
And then you would still have the crosswalk at Quarry Street going over to College Drive.
Correct, yep, the same location. Again, no refuge island shown here, and the price does not include the flashing beacons, but those can both be easily.
Jeremy,
Yeah.
would it be feasible, come down about a half a block, right where you got the left turn going into Quick Star and the left turn going into the Decorah Mart, if you will? Nope, come back, right there.
Yep.
What if you put a pedestrian crossing there with the refuge island in the middle to divide those 2 turn lanes so somebody's not riding one past that, but then you're able to get the people away from both of those intersections where people are turning so they can cross the road?
Yeah, we could look to see how that would fit. When we were looking at, so if I'll take, for example, this drive into Decorah Mart, this is a really tight, short queue to get in here. And then, you know, we wanted to provide a little bit longer queue, assuming, without knowing for sure where traffic patterns are gonna go, that perhaps there's gonna be more traffic going this direction. We could look at that and see, there are some requirements on the sizing where, what they need to be, but I think there are some options for refuge islands, and maybe a mid-block crossing is preferable.
Because then people turning south off Quarry Street onto College Drive, that refuge island is not gonna be an issue like it is on Montgomery Street when you got a longer vehicle like a school bus running over the curb with somebody standing there.
Yeah, we have a little more room here, a little more width than we do on Montgomery with Refuge Island, but yeah, that was it's always a concern with when you put the nose of those out towards an intersection, is when you have traffic turning that they could get.
And then going back up to North Street there, if you square up coming off North Street, similar to what you did down on Fifth Ave, do we really need a left turn and a straight right turn there? Is there enough traffic to warrant that, or would just 2 lanes be plenty? You can either go straight, left, or right, similar to the traffic coming at you from across the street.
Are you talking about modifying these two here?
Just make 1 lane there. Bring them together so that they're facing the traffic coming the other way, so,
Oh, these 2 lanes into one?
yes.
Well, I think you do want to turn there.
Well, they do, but there's a lot of people coming the other way, and if people, you know, that, when you're turning right, somebody might be turning left coming off College, going up Locust too, and, you know, there's always that confusion, whereas if you just got head-to-head straight on, you
Think
can
you'll
see
back-
better.
That already,
Up a little bit,
that
you
already
back-
backs up to toppling Goliath without the increased traffic load from Quick Star. And so
Right.
I'm concerned, I'm sorry, the old toppling Goliath site, it doesn't go all the way up Highway 9. So I'm concerned that we do need, I wish we didn't, but I do think you do need the turning lane there because of queuing.
I'm just trying to keep it clean so we can shorten that up to make the crossing there a little bit safer.
I get it, but I know even without Quick Star, if that was 1 lane and there was no turn there, that would back up considerably.
What,
Short times of the day, though.
In regards to what Randy's talking about too, I mean, isn't that the same situation we have on Fifth Avenue now? Where people are gonna be turning right, they're not gonna look at all if you got people crossing.
But that's what it is currently today. People turn
And
right.
it's a challenge because you've got that parking lot has such a massive ingress egress.
Which parking lot?
The
On the east side.
River
Pavement.
City paving,
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
whatever
Yeah,
you,
they share one with the Nissy preschool.
Right.
This drive right here.
Right.
See that? It's a very wide drive.
yeah. So, I mean, you could potentially move it down
So this is,
in line with
Clear,
the,
these concepts are by no means final design, right? We just wanted to show an example, start the conversation, and see the direction that council wanted to.
Is this one, Jeremy, is this one completely done with paint currently as you got it drawn up right there?
This is majority paint and paint removal. I mean, it's almost 4,000 feet of pavement markings we were estimating. And then some ADA improvements to make this crosswalk ADA compliant. So
Okay.
some sidewalk work.
Okay, but mostly paint, pretty much.
What was the Bolton recommendation about the east side just after you cross the bridge? Was it to close the
Right here?
entry into that parking lot?
Yeah, I think there's some confusion because there's actually a sign on these lights that say left turn only, which would imply that when you're sitting southbound here, you should have to turn left. So I think the recommendation was either to eliminate this drive or to correct our signals and signs to reflect that it's not truly an intersection. I don't know about eliminating. I think we need to talk more about that because I think the flow of this parking lot, all the angle spots are facing this way.
Right.
So we left it as is and just assumed that we'd make some changes to the signage would be easier. It could be a part of a larger conversation, but they recommended that something be done here one way or the other to improve that.
So the southbound turning left there on College, they're not turning into the intersection, or are they? Are they?
They'd
Is
be
there a curb
turning-
right there?
They
The
would have to turn into this drive. the drive is a part of the intersection. It's kind of like what Quick Star's drive, proposed would drive would be. It's right across from an intersection. So that was kind of Bolton and Mink's point. Is it part of the intersection or is it not? There are actually lights facing east that it would imply that it's part of the intersection. And if so, the signage should be as such.
So is
But as
the,
far as engineering, does it make more sense just not for it to be an intersection, safety-wise?
Possibly. I think we would need to talk if you want to eliminate access to a drive to a business. Not that that couldn't be done, but that would be, I guess, my question back is do we want to keep that access drive?
I have plenty of sort of small, like, comments on this, but I know that we're at an too early stage for that. And so I guess I might just reserve them to say my question, which is, of these two general approaches, knowing that crosswalks might move or features might be added or tweaked, which one do you think provides the city with the best opportunity to enhance the safety of especially pedestrian users of College Drive?
I think this one here. I think this is, I'll defer to Bolton and Mink's recommendation as well. I think this one combines a lot of what was in option B. But I would also note that this is mostly paint, so
Right.
like our Fifth Avenue project.
Then I'll make a
we try
comment
in
then.
some respects.
I'll just make a comment then to my fellow council members. Like, there are different things to prioritize when you're designing a road or redesigning a road, and flow of traffic is one important thing to care about, and the cost is obviously important to care about. But I think the most important thing to care about, especially in a now more highly trafficked, heavily pedestrianized connection between College and our downtown, I think the thing that we ought to put at the very top of our list of priorities is pedestrian safety. I'm paying attention to what Jeremy says and his evaluation of this, and I encourage you to take a deep look at this and consider things like, would a mid-block crossing be an enhancement to safety, or would it be something that people coming from the north ignore as they cut across College on the way to Quarry? I mean, there's reasons for and against placing that crossing at mid-block or right at Quarry. A lot of the traffic crossing that road is probably heading to Ice Cave or Dunning Spring, or maybe to the side entrance of the Quick Star. All that said is, if this is your recommendation, I want to see it workshop further, but that's my preference. And especially because we're not talking about a very expensive investment, I think that we should consider this as kind of an experiment. Paint can be moved, and if this makes this road more safe for pedestrians, and it's now been recommended by 2 sets of engineers, I think we should, proceed with this version.
so does it stand to reason that the council's giving direction to Jeremy to look further into option A and develop that more and then bring it back for further discussion? Is that?
So I have a question. I have a couple questions that are large picture, not small picture. But I just need to clarify what you were saying, Steve. You said something about not having a crosswalk, or that the crosswalk should be go back to what you said.
So I was speaking specifically to Randy's suggestion that we move the crosswalk.
That's what currently in front of us.
Yeah, and,
Okay,
and
thank you,
frankly, to the extent possible, you obviously know that I'm going to speak in favor of, mid crosswalk, what are they called, islands, RFID, especially because Quick Star, that would be kind of their baby anyway. So I think these are all good enhancements. Again, I'm an idealist here. I think that this large-scale redevelopment of a major section of a heavily trafficked and pedestrianized corridor in our city represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to show that our city wants, everyone to have safe roads and stress-free commutes, not just people who are in cars, but people who get to work with a bike or who have kids that they walk to school with. And I think we need to center their experience because of all the positive externalities that those multimodal commuters create for all of us, whether we drive or not. And I'll say this as someone who bikes with his children down this road hundreds of times a year. I am always nervous. I'm always nervous for their safety, in a way that I'm never nervous when I'm driving a car in this town. And I think that for too long we've expected parents of our most vulnerable citizens to be okay experiencing stress and discomfort as the cost of faster traffic. And I think maybe that's a priority that's messed up. And so I hope that we don't just do the safest thing on this page, but I hope we take a really serious look at, is this the best that we can do? Not simply is it better than what we've done, but is this the best that we can do? And I guess we're talking about a huge right-of-way. We already have it. We're talking about new paint. So as part of this, I would hope that we're leaving the possibility open for an eventual re-engineering of the street. I mean, we don't have necessarily the funds for that right now, but a re-engineering of the street to create, grade-separated, buffered two-way bike lane. That's not the same thing as a sidewalk, and that is not right next to trucks that are moving 40 miles an hour.
Okay.
Okay.
But anyway,
Can I
I'm-
get my other question?
Just a minute, just a
I
minute.
just-
I just wanted to ask a question. And
I
now
know that's beyond the scope of tonight's discussion, but I do think now is the right time to say it, because otherwise, people will say, well, you were there when that thing was passed and you never objected. So
Well,
Appreciate your input.
Thank you,
I want to
Mayor.
hear from Emily, and then I want to move on. I'll put
Okay,
it that
so
way.
I had a couple questions, actually. Steve, I think you'll like these questions, right? We had talked about this bike lane. So I guess, in short, I think about the Vision Iowa and how do we bring together, I'm more interested in more than paint, right? That if we're talking about bike safety and pedestrian safety, greening this space would be key in how we can put more greenery to slow, right? Because if we just put paint there, there's a car aggravation level of I'm following paint, as opposed to when you have a street that actually has medians in it that have green, they feel like they're on a smaller street. Right now, you're going to feel like you're on a big street with a lot of paint, and that paint's going to be frustrating to drivers. And I think there's a certain amount of it's still going to be a very intense feeling on the street until we can put some kind of traffic calming feature as well. So when you say this is Road Diet Light version, I am curious. I really do. If this is $20,000, add another $10,000, $30,000, I am curious what it looks like to put traffic calming features on this.
How about if you take all the comments that have been here and then do some work on it and bring it back for looking at it again at a closer level?
I'm
Now
also
that you-
curious about the little triangle on starting the bridge as you're on College going south. Kudos on the experiment of closing that turning lane on Fifth Avenue. Excellent work. I don't know how many times I've been pleased to go through that intersection since it's been done, but wondered if that triangle also do a temporary to permanent type of get people thinking about it. It's narrow there as a way of calming. Just a comment.
And finally, can I grab?
Go ahead.
Just finally, in Dropbox, I see that there are two Quick Stars requests for city's response for easements. In the Vision Iowa document that was done several years ago, there was a pedestrian path back behind this campus, basically, from the bridge, College Avenue Bridge, College Drive Bridge, basically back behind the proposed
Businesses.
business area. If two easements are already being provided, what kind of work would it take for us to get easements in order to put a dedicated pedestrian area in the back of this campus to alleviate pedestrian traffic in the front?
It may
I mean,
be
I
a
can't-
longer.
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of Quickstar. I know that, our requirement for 15 feet of setback from the toe of the slope of the levee leaves 15 feet of relatively unused flat area, that one of the uses for that could be some kind of pedestrian trail.
I guess I would like to see us look at that in conjunction with this redesign potentially, because we're looking at multimodal transportation, bike traffic and pedestrian traffic to our most heavily trafficked tourism destination in Decorah. So as part of this, I would just ask that that also be revisited.
I just want to make one more comment. I did speak to 2 different groups last week, mostly senior citizens that have been in the area for 50, 60 years. And this originally was Highway 52 that came down here. And I believe at one time it was 2 lanes. And they at one time then expanded it to 4 lanes. So there was a lot of concern from these people that we've gone from 2 to 4. And if we reduce it down to 3, at some point in time in the future, if we had to go to 4, we spent a lot of money going both directions, both different times. So I guess I would like to see this done with paint like this on a temporary basis so we can see how it works before we spend a lot of money on different things and realize that it wasn't the right way to go.
Yeah,
I'm
I think
gonna-
it's important to keep in mind, I think Bolton and Mink said the traffic would have to go up to over 20,000 vehicles a day to make a 3-lane, I think it was something like that.
Yeah, it was almost double the existing.
Almost double the existing traffic, not, to- that would,
If that's correct, right.
yeah.
So that was just the concern of a lot of citizens, the fact that we've gone from 2 to 4, and now if we reduce it down to 3, and at some point in time we have to go back to 4, we're gonna spend a lot of money for.
Jeremy, is there any other questions that you might have at this time before you go forward and start working on that plan?
We just need to know what's happening at this corner. right?
Okay.
I mean, I think we need some,
Okay.
that might, yeah.
Mayor, I just have one thing to add is, I'm a school bus driver. I've just started driving this year, and I spend a fair amount of time on my route now. In the mornings, I'm on Montgomery Street, and I take a left-hand turn to go to St. Ben's, and in front of me is an island, a walkable island, by the auto parts store. And I feel that's very safe. I like sort of being there, waiting to take my left-hand turn. I also go down Montgomery toward Broadway and take a left-hand turn there off of the 3-lane road. And I also spend some time on Short Street. I turn right on Short Street and immediately take a left on Middle Calmer Road and go up the hill. And I find that those intersections and those turns are very comfortable for a vehicle of that size, and you feel rather, safe, and you can see, you can count the traffic ahead of you fairly well, and so I'm intrigued as to what this might look like.
Okay, thank you. It's a lot to discuss, and we'll have more to look forward to. I'll put that on. Okay, discussion on the Quick Start site plan. Travis?
Okay, as Jeremy had talked about, a lot of that previous discussion, is referenced in item 21 here. Discussion on Quick Start site plan. As indicated at the August 29th work session, there were some additional considerations that were wanted to be made. And so this item on here is to allow further discussion on the overall site plan based on the traffic impact study from Bolton and Mink, based on the previous item 20 that's been had. And we'll take all that consideration for the potential of a site plan consideration at September 19th.
So no action, we don't have to.
Well,
Correct.
But wait, are we,
I will just say that I've gotten a lot of feedback that this proposed development has more pumps than any other store in town, and it's not directly off of a highway. It does feel like perhaps it's out of scope. So that's what I'm bringing forward from my constituents, is that they're not necessarily opposed to development, they're opposed to the number of pumps that might lead to more congestion and more problems with traffic safety. I think the exercise that we just went through is good. I'm just relaying the number of pumps concern.
I would echo it. So that's my other site. Well, I think I was the one who brought up at the last meeting, like, are we going to talk about other site plan issues? I went to visit the one in La Crosse. I had a conversation with Dex actually afterwards about it. And when you look at the number of pumps in La Crosse, it feels like a truck stop, right? The canopy's super high. The pumps there's just a ton of them. And so as I think about where this is located, it does seem out of size. So I asked Dex about, can you lower the canopy? He sent me a couple pictures about like bricking it. But I still think, even in all the things that he showed me, I'm still unclear why 20 pumps is appropriate for the site. And I would like to continue negotiations or discussions about a reduction of pumps. To me, there are 16 pumps on our highway ones. They're not always full. You can get in and out of them. And so to me, it's just too large.
So one of the other things brought up at the 29th work session was, and based on that conversation with Bolton and Make, and identified pedestrian access path, if you will, through the site. And in conversations with Dex, he had discussed that would most likely be off the north side of to do a defined pedestrian access on the north side, which has another entrance there positioned on the building that would direct those pedestrians away from the pumps and away from the vehicle traffic. That was one of the considerations, not but one of the considerations of staff on that. You know, Randy, I think you brought up, or no, maybe it was Kirsten, that there's one crosswalk identified. That's why we showed one crosswalk at that location, because on the south side of Quarry, instead of Iowa, that would then send any pedestrian traffic on the west side of College, if they are looking to cross and head to either Quickstar itself or just that general vicinity. It would drive that pedestrian traffic across on Quarry, and then those pedestrians can continue down Quarry to that side of the entrance of Quickstar. So
I think that dedicated pedestrian crossing across that campus is a very viable and needed thing. But I do feel that given the scale of this project, that potentially a downsizing in the number of pumps would not only meet the consumer need, but also we do, we kick around sustainability a lot, right? But we do have a concerted goal to be carbon neutral by 2030, and part of that is a reduction in carbon emissions. Carbon emissions are fuel, transportation's our number one. I think asking for a reduction in the number of pumps and potentially the addition of EV chargers in exchange for that, as we know that that potentially things are changing in regard to fuel, is not outside of the scope of our discussions.
Can you tell me, you've got two plans, A and B, and what all is the difference? I mean, I can look to see, but I can't look side by side.
A is the 4 to 3 lane conversion,
Okay.
and B is the dedicated turn lanes, but still maintaining 4.
Okay.
Okay, I
thank
think
you.
she's talking about the site plan, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm looking at the 21A and 21B.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you put I'll put on A, you put on B, I can see.
They're A and B on both of them, but I think we're talking about the
Actually,
site
it
plan.
might be,
Yeah.
A and B are duplicates, my
Okay.
apologies.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, is it a moral dilemma then?
right?
No, it's just that I kept going back and forth and trying to figure out which
What's the
one
difference?
What was the difference?
So, the other question I had, and I think it was brought up in a letter we received too, it goes back to what I said about Jeremy. I think the more that we can green this space, and that Quickstar can green this site plan beyond even their traditional greening, right? I think Steve said red mulch, but to think about, right, the natural areas that it's essentially, I mean, Quickstar will be the entrance to our natural areas, which, maybe there's a negotiation of like, hey, you're about to enter the most pristine areas of Iowa. Maybe you could match some landscaping to look accordingly. I know that they have landscaped prairies, they have landscape in other designs that they do, right? In other places that require certain decor on the outside of their buildings, Quickstar works on that. other places require certain kinds of plantings that fit with the, use natural or local plants, you know.
And this is a right turn,
These would be discussions I'd like to have with Quick Start in terms of how we make this space
making this
greener,
an only left
looking
turn.
greener than a lot of concrete.
I think I know why 21A and B are duplicates. I was trying to put into Dropbox a previous front elevation that council has seen, the one that does show the landscape that Quickstar, I believe they brought actually a full-size visual as well as included in Dropbox previously for council. I'll grab that and put that in there so that anyone that wants to refresh their memory on that can go ahead and grab that.
It seemed like when we initially started, they talked about the increase of space, green space, that they had in this site compared to in what they've done before. But that doesn't state that they couldn't put more in. I don't know. But I think that they did make a comment that they had put quite a bit of green space in this site.
No, I think that's true. Kudos to them. I do think they put more green space, especially when I went to visit the ones in La Crosse, which virtually had none.
I think their comment was that we currently have 0 green space now, and they'd put 30% more than what we currently have.
Do you like this one?
I think we have pretty clear direction from Bolton and Mink and maybe from Jeremy as well, that there are just things that we simply should require as almost non-negotiables because they touch on continuing to keep College Drive's stellar safety track in effect. So for me, I'll be strongly disinclined to vote for a site plan that doesn't include all of the pedestrian safety enhancements recommended by Bolton and Mink, including elevated, visibly differentiated sidewalks across the aprons, a safe crossing with pedestrian island and blinker, the route to and from the store. Those things for me are pretty non-negotiable, but I also encourage the staff to realize that Quickstar's heavily invested in this and that, it's our job as a city council to get as good of a deal for the city as we can. And there's a deep desire for things like undergrounding the electric lines or maybe the alternative bike and walking path across the back of the store. So those are things that I'd like to see in the next site plan proposal from Quickstar, if at all possible.
If you're Travis.
Oh, I was just gonna note, I did add, replace the item 021B with the original, what I had meant to put in there, which is the rendered landscape plan, had been seen in the June work session on Quickstar. I don't know, Jeremy, if you still have your Dropbox pulled up at all,
I've got mine.
that you can
So,
share it. so
on
everyone
that, is
can
that-
see.
On what you just dumped in there, that dotted line, I think at the original meeting we had with Quick Start, they did talk about a walking path between the dike and their development.
They did, they pulled it out.
Yeah, they pulled it out, but there's a dotted line there, is that suggests that could be pulled back in?
Well, I know they initially had picnic tables and some other vertical structures in that area, and that the Army Corps would prohibit that, so we did make them pull that portion out.
Wasn't that in between their property and like it did Pizza Ranch? Wasn't along that side?
No, the initial showed it actually along the toe of the slope of the dike there, and so we did make them pull that out as a condition of the Corps.
I mean,
Bless you.
so anyway, if you're looking at that drawing, there's a dotted line that seems to me that would make a great walking path. You could come from Iowa Avenue, which is really our sort of
Is
extended,
that in the Dropbox?
or Fifth Avenue, I don't know why I said Iowa.
Yeah,
Which one is it?
I just replaced it double. This is what was supposed to be in there. This is again a rendering that was shown at the June work session on Quickstar.
I mean, that little path, if that was a walking path, could essentially bridge Fifth Avenue and Ice Cave Road, and you could take a little part of the bike trail almost and avoid all of that development there as a bike or a walker.
Yeah, I would note there's a structure in the way as you go farther south.
There's a cut through in
the Oh, dike there, yeah.
too, isn't there? There's a cut through in the dike right there too, isn't there? Like where the water passes through there?
By Pizza Ranch, yeah, there are culverts. There's a culvert penetration, which we'd have to go around. Yep, yeah, thanks, that's a good point, too.
I can appreciate the interest in this path, and I'm not opposed to it, but I want to make sure that we don't think that this is really important because it'll be terrible to walk along the front of this site plan. If we think that'll be terrible or unsafe or whatever else, then we just shouldn't allow them to build it that way. And so I feel like I don't want to get distracted by this because this wouldn't be used by, everyone who lives on the west side, who I represent, to get to Ice Cave. They would have to deal with the front, so we need to make sure that that's right too.
Certainly agree, but the document that did bring forth this proposition did do traffic counts, pedestrian traffic counts, and studies to bring forth that recommendation, regardless of the development of this area. And so to say that it's not valid, I think is disingenuous. So I hope we don't drop the ultimate solution in exchange for something that is not, as you say, for a once-in-generation potential experience.
Travis, so you're looking at this process as far as looking at the next city council meeting for approval of this site plan. And what do you need as far as having a conversation with Quickstar with the items we've just talked about?
Well, Quickstar also has representatives that have heard the exact comments, but we'll get with them and see if they want to make any proposed changes
Upgrades?
to the site plan for consideration of council. And then at September 19th meeting, as Stephen had pointed out, he would make an approval contingent on a number of factors. Even if they're factors that are not in the site plan as it's proposed, council could insert their own requirements as
I'd have to say
conditions.
I'm still in favor of the idea that the grocery store be in the front along the street as opposed to behind all the pumps in the back. So I'm not giving up on the idea that the main aspect of business, the grocery, would be to the front, to the sidewalk, to the pedestrian traffic, as opposed to behind all the traffic and the pumps.
He had stated reasonings why on the light on the site plan that was not an option, had he not?
Yeah, the
It
reasoning
had
that
something
I
to do with
saw
the
him,
car wash
that
and-
the reasoning Dax put in an email that I saw was that customers favored the traditional Quick Star model with a big parking lot and gas pumps in front. That doesn't match with my sense of how special of a site this is. And how
I thought there was some reasoning as far as the shapement or whatever.
there might have been additional things said, but that was a comment I saw.
Branding did stick out, yeah.
Well, Jeremy, I
You wouldn't
think,
get the front of the store facing out to the front, you'd get the back of the store facing out there, because they're gonna face the front to the pumps on the other side.
That's their choice.
yeah, but now if they didn't, right, if they didn't face the pumps in the store together, can you imagine people are getting out of their cars at pumps, walking around a building to get into the front? That seems even more pedestrian unsafe.
There are plenty of cities that have codes for urban located gas stations that require that the building be at the sidewalk right of way. Now that's not to say that we have to have that. I'm just saying this is a problem that has been solved in many places, and Quickstar has architects.
No, I actually, ordinarily I would see that as a benefit. If I remember right, we did ask Jeremy about that, and it was actually, Jeremy, sorry.
goes, "No."
I think we asked you in that meeting, and you did say that this sort of walking alternative around Quickstar this way couldn't happen if the pumps were in the back. But maybe that's, I'm imagining that differently.
I don't know that it couldn't happen. I don't know that maybe it's as high a priority, depending on what the objective of that path is. Is it to bypass this site and go to Dunning's, or is it to get to the store, wherever that may be located? So I think that was maybe my comment.
Okay.
What else do you need?
Yeah, we need to, so there's a number of easements that exist on that property from the 40s even, and not just that property, but also the Gailing property, that some of which no longer have no, well, arguably none of them really have a city purpose for them anymore, because part of them were the flood control system of the 40s, which are no longer in place. The Good Times, the patio, there's a formalized easement for that. So if the site plan is approved, that's an easement that's no longer needed because, well, and arguably it's not needed right now because Good Times isn't in there anymore. So there's a number of easements also in Dropbox that are applied to the site right now in Quickstar's request for the vacation, as well as staff's evaluation and recommendations on those easements. And for discussion purposes, again, this is discussion, this is not an action item, but are there easements in there that council has questions of? Or
Can you
John, maybe
can you bring up Beacon, Jeremy, so that we can visualize this?
And John, maybe you can run over briefly.
Well, there's a number of easements, whether it's on the Gailing property or where Viking Plaza is. And I think on the, let's see, I'm looking at the current rental one right now, there's about 8 easements they ask to be removed. And I think we have in Dropbox some comments, city staff comments. Many of these, there's no issue. Frankly, I don't know how Jack and Jill got built with some of these easements there. But the ones that the city staff, I think, would recommend that there be a little bit more consideration. Obviously, anything to do with the dike, we got to protect. And then we just want to make sure any utility easements don't cut off an adjoining property, like the Pizza Ranch. And then there was one that was a sidewalk easement granted to the city in 2021. It's a fairly small one, but we don't want to release that one. And just to remind the council, the process for us to vacate or cancel any easement in favor of the city is similar to what we did with Grucey's. It's over behind the old greenhouse. They had the utility easement and sidewalk easement. It's a resolution setting a public hearing and proposing vacating the easement, publish notice, hold a public hearing, then pass a resolution. So it's about a month process.
Is this easement that strip, that contiguous strip?
That easement back there? That, I don't think there is an actual easement. It's just a parcel. I don't know what the history is.
Okay,
why
so the
it's like that.
easements then, just because I don't know what the Gailing property is?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's the Roscoe's, the pub.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And I don't know that we have a good diagram that actually visually depicts the location of all these easements. Most of them are across lot 2 of 2 of 2, and so.
Right. Just being a visual person, I wanted to see if I thought there was any impact to the city with potential redevelopment or future uses for ingress, egress, and not be short-sighted before giving something up.
And just speaking of easements, weren't they going to grant an easement to Pizza Ranch for ingress and egress?
Correct. So that is the site plan. Some of the conditions of the site plan consideration would, one, be an easement to Pizza Ranch, or Pizza Ranch on utilities as well as access, because right now, if I remember correctly, the building itself sits right on the property line, and there is a loading door on the north side of the building there. So Quickstar was going to grant an access easement as well as utilities, because their gas and electric meters are on that side. And then the city doesn't actually have an easement right now. As Jeremy indicated, the Army Corps says we need to maintain the 15 feet off the toe of the slope. We don't actually have an easement for that right now, right, Jeremy? And so the site, as part of the consideration, Quickstar would grant an easement to the city for that 15 feet.
Clarify, there is an easement that covers the vast majority of this site from when the levee system was built. The request from Quickstar is to release essentially the portion of the site that is no longer needed to build a levee, but we want to retain that 15 feet setback that we're required to do. And then also some of our levee, stormwater, our storm sewer pipe and levee crossings through the
Those
lake as well.
culverts, I think
Yeah.
we need additional
There was a
for
couple
that,
easements, we
correct?
just, things we want to retain before we would release this other more inclusive easement. And John, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think it was a much larger easement that they were asking that be released.
Correct. That was number 1 and 2 in their requests for perpetual, release of perpetual easement rights regarding the dry run flood control project. And we, as Jeremy said, we could do that if the council approves in return for a new easement for that 15-foot buffer.
Do those run with the land?
Yeah, all of these are
Like a
perpetual
covenant?
easements.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have no objection to vacating, the easements that we don't need, but I was wondering this last time and I didn't ask the question. I need to ask it now. What, is it just, the upside for us is just cleaner books? I mean, we have fewer easements to keep track of. Our titles are a little cleaner, or is there any material gain to the city in releasing easements that we're neutral on? Does that question make sense?
Yes, it does. I mean, what's the gain to the city? Depends on how you look at it. I suppose if it's to help somebody develop the land, I'd say yes. And going back to my comment about Jack and Jill, I would say if anybody wants to develop this land in the future, some of these have got to be dealt with, because I don't know how some of these have lasted this long.
So, just to clarify, without releasing this easement, this site plan would not be valid.
Actually, these are not requirements of the city of Decorah. These originated, this whole issue, besides our concerns about the flood, about the 15-foot barrier from the dike, these resulted from the title opinion done by Quickstar's attorney to the sellers. And my understanding is basically, and Quickstar is extremely thorough with their purchase agreements, and these are conditions
Of the purchase agreement.
Of the purchase agreement is my understanding.
That the city releases these
Yeah, I mean,
to the, kind of like the industrial lane, it's the process. The city releases it to the existing landowners then sell the land unencumbered to Quickstar.
yes, because actually the applicant is
Yeah.
the current landowner for each of these.
Gotcha.
So that when they sell it and close with Quickstar, these easements don't exist or have been modified.
I have a question talking about things getting built, right? Like Jack and Jill. How do we have a barn in the right of way where Bob's Standard used to be?
Excuse me?
There's a back behind Bob's. There's a barn there.
Oh,
You can see where it is.
I have no idea. I mean, these just strange things.
As we clean things up, it'd be great to have that barn not be in the right of way, because if that barn was gone and we were to clean up these easements because of that right turn off, because of where the city's property starts, coming right off the Fifth Avenue Bridge right there, that little triangle that we actually own, you could come back and have that trail move right along the city 15-foot levee easement, and that trail would be able to extend all the way back to Corey Street. Yeah.
What is that barn?
And some of this might have existed prior to the levee system.
I bet it
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
But just from the standpoint of,
Behind there.
if we release something that was, old, we should also clean up something that's potentially wrong. And my thought is that if we're cleaning up this campus, that this is a good time to do it. That if the landowners who have the barn would be willing to get rid of that because it's in the right of way, it would help us clean up that whole easement for the city in a uniform fashion from the start of the property coming right off the bridge all the way to Corey Street.
Hey, I think we should be working with that type of stuff, but I'm going to direct us back to the site plan discussion.
Well, it was just because of the
No,
easements, right?
No, that's okay. No, and I think that that's worthy to be discussing that too. So what I'm looking for from you, Travis, is you got enough to work with as far as if you want to bring that site plan down the
Well,
same-
if we all agree that silence is affirmation, yes, I have enough.
I would
We
not.
haven't been exactly.
I think we should
months
figure out the
and-
flip
I
design
would,
if.
I would
let's-
not, I would not support giving up the easements unless we can clean up the entire campus. Just saying.
There is so much here to unpack. I
Yeah,
don't know
there
where to
is.
start.
Yeah.
We have 2 council members at least interested in a flip plan. We have 1 council member, maybe 2, interested in easements. I think we need some direction.
But I'm assuming though too that when you're talking about the 15-foot area by the levee, that nothing can go in there, including probably a paved trail, correct?
Structure.
It needs to be, it,
It
It-
can't be a structure, but a trail must
no,
be.
but
up to
it,
we
doesn't
have
it
a-
need to be just left grass and to preserve the levee?
No, because I think we have a trail,
It's like a road.
Oh,
yeah.
But there's also that run through the middle of the dike there where the river comes.
Yeah, the purpose of that, of the 15-foot is really
Okay.
access.
okay.
We've got a lot of cross-talking going on, including down over there.
I think they're trying to figure out how to.
Well, I think, one of the things is we keep bringing stuff as far as when you're looking at the site plan where it should be. We've talked about that for a long time.
We haven't.
Yeah,
That's
no, we've talked about, we have talked about it in different fashion.
we actually have never talked about the site plan other than traffic.
No, we have. We have talked in different times on it,
When Dex was here,
but,
and then we talked about it with traffic.
We talked about the flip site plan once or twice, I'm sure.
okay.
Um,
But what I'm getting at is, to move forward, what do we need for consideration that you need to bring back on that 17th?
That's honestly what I was trying to give sidebar with John here to.
Okay. Would you like us to sit back and quiet and take a break and you can sidebar?
So I will, I mean, as long as they're discussing, one of the reasons I said we should talk about the site plan is because I feel like we haven't actually talked about anything but traffic. And I felt like there was a lot of other things we needed to discuss, and
Perhaps what we talked about it was not in the council setting.
well, then we haven't really talked about it, have we? I mean,
We know, we've talked about it in some of the committee meetings.
no committee meeting.
We talked about people wanting to turn it.
That was when Dex gave his original presentation, and we said, what does it look like to flip it? That was on a Facebook post. It wasn't at a council public meeting.
Okay.
So,
Now, there's a lot,
Yeah, it was.
I did too.
Putting 2 lighted crosswalks across there, moving the electric pole, moving.
totally get it, totally related to traffic. And that other part was in that first meeting. We've literally had 2 meetings on this.
Because that all had to do with the site plan.
We had the public meeting where Dex presented.
No. Yeah. Okay, you guys need more time than what might be applicable in this setting, I'll put it that way.
So
I think they were talking amongst
I
themselves.
think they were. So I think what John and I have kind of come up with is if the council wants to further dive into this to discuss any other deviations from anything previously discussed, scheduling a special meeting next week to basically come up with I think we're at a point, honestly, where it's almost consideration of council and vote it down or vote it up. And if it's down, it could be
Well, and you could, you could
Maybe more
discuss.
time would have been a good idea.
Yeah, well, you can discuss with Quick Star some of these ideas and see if they are in agreement with any of it. And if they are, if it takes more time to discuss it, you can continue it. But if not, if there's a consensus amongst the majority of you of one way or another, sure, you can vote on it. But we're also talking about the 19th, Travis is gone. And so,
That's right.
but trying to keep this thing moving and not kicking it down until October if you don't have to. So that's kind of what we're talking about, the idea of maybe a special meeting next week with the backup idea that on the 19th, you could have it as an agenda item. Travis won't be here, but hopefully most of the you'll have gotten through a lot of the substantive discussion next week.
I'm sensing frustration that these last minute, however it's going to be framed, objections are being raised by council, when the reality is this is the process. John, you were explaining this to me 4 months ago already when I was saying council needs to talk about this. You said, well, it really starts with P&Z, the Board of Adjustments, the appeal is going to happen. But I will say this, along the entire way, Quick Start has heard from hundreds of public comments, many dozens of private correspondences, things that they could do to adjust the site plan to make it, I guess, more easy for us to vote on. And largely, they've chosen to wait until this moment. So this is our time to negotiate, and I think I know it's frustrating, I just think it's worth the time.
So what possibly would be covered in a meeting next week is a more clarification about what you're asking as far as Quick Start is concerned.
I think there's pretty wide consensus because I haven't heard anyone object to scrupulously following the traffic engineer's recommendations, to shooting for undergrounding if at all feasible, and to exploring the possibility of this path by the dike. There were a few other suggestions like flip store plan that didn't seem to win as universal of approval by the council, and so maybe staff should take that as an indication not to push for that. But I think the other things are pretty clearly consensus items that the council would like to see staff get into the plan that we vote on, if possible. As fellow council members, this is a really good time to speak up if you disagree with what I just said.
No, I don't disagree, but I will say that I would not entertain the thought of a flip site plan. I think that's past. I think what we're looking at is, what we should vote on, largely.
You had the site, the way it's laid out. You had the pump, the information, or, reduction of, the potential reduction of number of pumps. See, what else did we have? I know those were the two main ones that we talked about.
And I would also have to say, I like the two options for the roadway. However, looking at as much as I like the road diet, I still think that left-hand, or the left-hand turn out of Quarry does not work as well with the road diet light as it does with the 4-lane.
So that really is really, that's for consideration. Is that a key as far as looking at this site plan?
Well, I think we should decide one way or the other what we're going to do with the road.
Well,
Don't you?
Well, because I think in conjunction with that is how much are we going to ask Quick Start to participate in this, right?
Sure.
There was recommendation from the engineer. I do wonder, Jeremy, just a quick question, that second site we looked at, the road diet light, didn't seem in my mind to have the same safety precautions at the Quarry Street intersection. Was that just this is a quick rendition and it will, or is that?
It was this is the base option without any of that, and you can add those in. So that's why we
Okay.
had those separately priced out, so then you'd have to add those.
Yeah,
together.
I'm with Kirk that I actually think that we should add back in, when you redo that for our next meeting, that Quarry Street pullout as it was. Because I agree that, I think that seems safer there.
The road diet light doesn't address the left-hand turn at all.
Yeah.
Well, those are considerations that he's gonna be working on or showing something different.
I just don't think we
What I'm
directed him
looking
that.
at is the Quick Star site plan, to be able to take forward on the 19th, is it, or 17th?
19th would be
19th.
the,
So
so,
maybe it would be helpful if each council member went and gave you their sort of like, this is what I would need in the site plan.
so this is, John and I, again, brief sidebar. I've done this once before, but it takes the council as a whole. God, this is gonna sound extremely cheesy, but,
Go for it, dude.
okay, to basically you piecemeal it. Council says, we agree that we're not going to agree to all facets of this site plan. But we as council acknowledge that 7 council members are representing the community as a whole. And so if in individual aspects, council members vote 4-3, one way or another, the council have a gentleman's agreement, for lack of a better term, that 4-3 on each individual aspect wins. 20 pumps versus 16. What's the vote? 4-3 or 5-2, whatever it is. And then at the end of the day, you have a site plan piecemealed together on concepts that, all right, this is the one put forward for council consideration, but where it has the potential to fall apart is at the end, if any one particular council member says, I didn't get that one aspect I wanted, I vote no, instead of the concept as a whole. It's extremely difficult to do, but that is one way for us to piecemeal a site plan together based on the majority of council's input.
Would that be why you would be? Would that be, you'd be doing something like that at the special meeting for next week? Is that what you're talking about?
Whatever you think is the best time to do it, but I think you gotta start knocking out things that you can get consensus on, whether it's approving it or not, and start narrowing it down to the things that maybe you need more consideration or negotiation with Quick Start. But we gotta start moving the ball somewhere as far as either, yeah, this is gonna fly, or it's not gonna fly, and move on to the next thing. But again, I would say, there's going to be a final vote that none of this is binding until you get to the last final vote to approve it all. But somehow we got to figure out where what there is a majority approval on in the aspects of the plan.
Can I, so I have 6 bullets I think that we're talking about. Can I read those and then we say these are what we're thinking about? Just for clarification, we've talked about so many things. So I know there's an indication of a 20 pump reduction, that the trail behind the site, contributing to a road diet of some percentage, and the crosswalk, which they've already agreed to, but, right? I threw in, I kept saying natural, but what I really meant is some native plantings on the ground. A flip station, again, I'm just naming the ones that we have mentioned, and buried lines. Are there other site plan related issues that we have not, that are not in those bullets?
I mean, all of the engineering enhancements for safety,
And the road, yeah.
the aprons across, the path to and from, et cetera, and Ross's path. I mean, that's. Can we just call it Ross Road? Is that okay?
Well, I put trail behind it. Should we call it Ross Road? No, trail behind it.
And just so everyone knows, just from a point of clarity, I emailed Dax Conley on September 28th of 2021, the visioning plan that shows Ross's path. This is not a new concept. I have discussed it with landowners. I have discussed it with Scott, the Quick Star Development Vice President, I guess he would be. So this is not something that's coming forth randomly. The only reason I brought it up again was because of the easements. And easements are easements, and it provides an opportunity for this to happen. And that's, I think, the mayor was on the.
We've talked about it.
Yeah, we've talked about it.
Actually,
So,
we had talked about it with Dax too.
right, exactly.
My question would, did you say you had 6?
Well, I just want to, let me just hold on one sec. Yes, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What I'm calling the trail behind is Ross Road, but I also, I mean, I think that was in there and got taken out. So I
Okay.
am, it's not just Ross that would want that. With the contributing to the road diet, Steve, do you feel like we need each one of those things? Like when I say contributing to the road diet, I'm actually talking about the like road diet deluxe of what I think you're thinking too, which is the safety precaution, or the safety things, elevated roadways, all of that.
Road
It's
diet,
just that without a
buried
drawing
lines.
from Jeremy, it's hard to like say all of that.
What was the 6th one?
Buried lines,
Oh, I got that, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
I got that one. I have pumps, road diet, buried line, flip side, path behind. What's the 6th one?
I don't know, I think the
Native
pump thing is
plantings.
overreach. I
Pardon?
think Quick Start knows what they need and what they want for their customers in terms of their store design. And I think for us to meddle in their business is overreach.
What's interesting, it was actually, I got that idea from, you're talking about the native plantings?
No,
Oh,
flip
sorry.
I'm
side.
talking about the pumps.
I got the idea from Jack. who
Dictating
said that-
dictating to them how to do business and how many pumps to offer is I think overreach.
It's interesting because of all of the things that we discussed, the 20 pumps to me is actually what we should be focused on because it has to do with the size and scope of this particular development. It's like, would we put a super Walmart down there? Right? I mean, there is a certain amount of scaling development to where it is. And so we are essentially creating a larger gas station development than we have on either highway.
This is so small of a gas station compared to what is going on in other parts of the country. I've never been to one, but I've heard about these Buc-ee's that are just gigantic and have 70 to 120 pumps. This is just a slightly larger Quick Start than what we already have.
This is
And it's
0.78,
just a
this
quick
is
start.
3.3 acres versus 0.7 acres, which is the other two combined. This is not a little larger than the other Quick Stars.
Okay, so it sounds, I mean, the pump piece is the one that should be left in, since we've discussed this at nauseum, okay? The one that I'm looking, if you're looking at those 6 things, the one would be the flipping the side, and I think you sort of, there was a couple that talked about flipping, but the majority have said no.
Well, I was only putting it in there in terms of if this is things we're voting on, if people wanted to have that, literally the flip gas station voted on. I was just putting it out there. I wasn't suggesting it.
Right,
thought it was
but
gonna
I
be
was
important.
looking at your pieces
I
as a
wasn't-
potential for what the council can agree on as far as when they're looking for
So I
this.
wasn't trying to put together my pieces, not all of these
Okay,
are mine.
okay.
I was putting together what I heard from council as
Okay.
points of sticking for this
Okay,
site
then
plan.
my question is the flip side. Would that be included?
I don't.
I haven't heard enough on that, so I think we should stop talking about it
Okay.
because it's not a good use of our time.
Okay, so
Okay.
you've got decreased in pumps, the road diet, buried lines, the path behind, and native plants. Those are your requests that you would ask for consideration for Quick Start.
You want to do that tonight? Decide on those things?
Well, I'm not sure you can do, I mean,
I don't know if we can
not sure
vote
you
on
can
things
do
like this
anything,
tonight.
no, but at least you've got it somewhat narrowed down.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. I mean, it's not an action item, but as we've said, this is non-binding, and think about what you do during your work sessions. You kind of take a straw poll on things. So, again, with the understanding, this is just trying to get a consensus of what to put on for final approval of a site plan. I think you can do that. Again, everybody's clear it's not a final action. The other thing, I think you really got to think about the order of these items that you vote on. My perception is the road issue is a key factor, because what you do with that might affect some of the other things. Maybe, I don't know, but I think there should be a moment of thought. I don't know if anybody else has any thought about key decisions that are going to affect other decisions.
I think the road might be the right thing to do regardless of development, and Bolton and Mink made that pretty clear. So the only thing out of what Bolton and Mink provided to us that would impact the development agreement or our approval one way or another is the participation of Quickstar in the safe pedestrian crossing. So if we can take the words road diet out of the approval process and just have a agreement amongst ourselves that the road diet is the right thing to do, regardless of development, but have the concept of safe crossing as a yay or nay as part of the development agreement. I think that's clear to Quickstar because we're the ones responsible for the street.
Except that I think that the Bolton and Minks plan was clear that Quarry Street turn should also be, that we wouldn't be doing any of this if there wasn't Quickstar coming there.
Well,
And I do think that we got the recommendation from the engineer, because when we said that, they said, no, we think that Quickstar has and should play a role in that turn.
But
So-
they also stated that that turn wasn't adequate enough to be able to see.
But
No
they-
matter who was on that corner.
But they literally have a slide that recommends development participates in it, and I do not want to let them off the hook for that.
So, sorry, to be clear, I think you're talking about two different turns.
Yeah.
Right.
The southbound left turn onto Quarry is what the traffic study said is warranted based on the development. That was it,
Yeah,
right? The right-hand turn off of Quarry and any improvements for sight distance, they noted that the existing sight distance is inadequate. But that's regardless of development. So I think
Okay.
they're
Sure.
two separate turns we're talking
appreciate
about. I just
that.
wanted to be clear.
so southbound turn and the safe crossings, we would want the developer contribution payments towards.
And because you packaged this in, I'm going to say it again because I really need it to be there. All of the recommended site enhancements, including the location of the sidewalk at the right-of-way, and the sidewalk the way that Jeremy thinks it would work best and flow best in the site plan. The apron, the level visibly identifiable crossings across the 3 aprons. I just want to make sure that no one is speaking against that, and I hope the staff hears that loud and clear.
Staff heard that loud and clear, but what I wanted to interject before is, Emily, you made the reference to elevated crosswalk when you were talking about the roadway. Are you talking about across College or Quarry, the installation of an elevated crosswalk? Or as staff believed, that was a reference to the driveway aprons?
The driveway aprons.
Okay.
She probably meant to say protected crosswalk, maybe even
Yes.
Like the
buffered.
pedestrian refuge islands?
When the engineer made the comment about cars having to go up,
Okay, that's across the driveway aprons?
Yep.
Okay.
sorry about that.
Just wanted to make that there was no elevated pedestrian, okay,
No bridge.
yeah.
Sorry about that. And then buried lines I already talked about, but
And buried lines would be on them because
Right.
it's not a street improvement. And in our utility meeting, that was pretty clear, right?
I would just say, you've got to tie this to the city code. And I would ask, again, where in the city code is it required for somebody to bury their line like this? New subdivision, it is, no question there. And I haven't looked into it, so somebody could point out where I'm wrong on it. But I would ask that, if it was, is there a safety? I mean, I think
The pole being at the driveway?
Well, I just bring that up as a
Well,
point to
my,
consider.
my point would be that pole is at the ingress egress point, and it's a visual distraction, right? So I would consider it as part of the site plan, because if you're looking and you're looking at that pole right at Iowa Avenue, it's a public safety concern in that
They're
site
the
plan.
ones that asked them to put that egress there, entrance and egress at Iowa Avenue. They had it down where it currently is.
Right, but the
So
pole's just
we
there.
Told them to put their entrance where the pole is, so that pole movement would be on us.
But I think that they said that they would do it. I think they said they,
They would be willing to help cost share some of this, but not all of it.
But,
Beca-
yeah, I think that they
Especially with the road, because we admitted we have a traffic problem on the road. Getting back to their site plan, I have a lot of faith in people that do this for a living, and these guys have been very successful at what they have done. they're not gonna invest $7 to $8 million into our community to fail.
Sure. So
if they
moving
need-
a
If they
poll.
need 20 pump, well, they said they would cost share some of these things. That would be one of them. If they need 20 pumps in there to be successful, so be it. If the pumps face forward, like all of their stations do, so their marketing and brand recognition is there, so be it. But, you know, they've been very successful at running their business, and I'm
Sure.
not gonna question them.
And they're not asking for abatements. I don't think anybody's questioning their business acumen, Randy, but these are not necessarily the wrong questions to ask.
I want to get back to John's comment. I believe what John is trying to say is the requirement of undergrounding existing overhead lines, not necessarily moving a pole and things like that, but taking a step beyond of undergrounding overhead lines. That is where we have to tie in. How does that apply in code?
Yeah, I've got a stab at that one. Our code explicitly directs the council to ensure that site plans provide adequate screening of on-site or industrial areas to neighbors. And I feel as if this is a way of ensuring that this site plan is appropriately fits the neighborhood aesthetic, given that it's an entrance to a natural, given that it's an entrance to a natural feature of Decorah.
Our comprehensive plan also talks about bluff protection sightlines in the comp plan itself. If we have an opportunity to remove visual distractions to an area in the comp plan, I think referencing back to something like that is not necessarily wrong.
Okay. Now, where are we? We've got,
I think we're at special meeting next week,
okay.
don't you?
Can you pull together?
Yes, I think you just got to take the time to start
No,
doing a
Larry
straw
said
poll on each one of these, and with hopes of getting it to a point where you can, maybe at the following meeting, or maybe that meeting, vote on the total package that you, up or down.
okay.
Is that gonna throw a wrench into the fact you're only gonna have 6 here?
Well, and maybe that's a reason.
Yeah, that's the straw poll only.
Maybe, I guess that's,
I could vote on those things prior to that, let you guys know, since it's not an actual vote on things.
I don't know if that helps, because again, I think it's trying to just build consensus as far
But
as,
if it's 3 and 3, there's no,
yeah,
it's gonna be
That's
painful.
what I'm worried about.
yeah, well, good point.
We feel like there's more consensus than you might.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe there is, and that's the thing. Until I hear a vote, I don't know. That
You have consents, you have gone through lists, you have come down some, added some.
The only thing we don't have, and I don't know how we figure out, in my mind, is what is the contribution to the southbound turn lane and those crosswalks? But, I mean, I think they said they would provide a crosswalk, so there's one. And is it a 50% of that southbound turn lane? Is it all that turn lane? It's paint, what is it?
Well, and that's
$2,000
why Jeremy color-coded it that way, because we do believe there is the potential for participation on the turning, and Quickstar has already said they have expressed they're going to contribute to the pedestrian crosswalk and that. They've already spoken to
Right,
that, so they're
right.
going to do that.
I think that's great.
And, as Jeremy talked about, the traffic impact study said a left turn lane for southbound on College was the only thing warranted
Sure.
on the vehicle traffic on College Drive. I want to be clear about that statement. So that is what we would emphasize with Quickstar on contributing to on College Drive is left turn lane for southbound traffic on the vehicle side.
And I think that the contribution we should ask for there should contemplate a likely permanent installation and not simply the paint portion. With curb and landscaping, or whatever Jeremy wants.
So if you want to,
Deluxe. Now we're going gourmet.
so we'd figure out a time when we could get together for a meeting next week in order to put these in some kind of order or listing or figure out how they have been addressed in another fashion.
Yes.
If it's next week, you could wind up with 3-3. I don't know that that's gonna help you.
Just
Well-
one other small item that's not part of this negotiation, but I feel I need to bring it up because I've heard it from a number of people. There have been a fair number of complaints given to me about the condition of the current site and the weeds and the growth and maintaining that, particularly because there are other businesses in the area. So I would ask that Quickstar or other agents take a look at that and clean it up, please.
Okay. Moving right along, I think. Discussion and possible action on sidewalk and sidewalk assessments.
Okay, this was on as a request of council members to follow up on, the city did a sidewalk assessment, and Jeremy's pulling up the results of that. From a staff standpoint, what we need is guidance on council on the improvements to be made. Staff have identified a number of corridors, that are missing connection points. Some of those are public and some of those are private land ownership, and want to have discussions with council on how they would like those to move forward. Jeremy, you want to take it away from there?
One question is, do we have that in the Dropbox?
No, this is actually our online GIS
I
tool.
gotcha.
So I can take screen captures and provide
Okay.
some access, but this is our full kind of live version that I just pulled up here. So just real, excuse me, just real quickly, this shows our mapped sidewalks in town. So this was an exercise we did last spring with a Luther student, a desktop review in partnership with Upper Explore Land who created this tool. So I just want to just real quick show you what we intend to use it for in addition to our planning purposes. But if I pick on, I'll pick on the street department here. We divided this into segments adjacent to different parcels. And so this tool allows us to capture a variety of data for sidewalks and then determine if repairs are necessary. So, for example, we can add pictures and everything to this. So this tells us that we have some repairs to do adjacent to the street department, but we can capture running slopes, ADA, all that sort of thing. But this tool, again, focuses on intersections, are the ramps, crossings ADA compliant, and then of course green is the presence of a sidewalk, red is the absence of a sidewalk, blue is stairs, or stairs. So from this, we have identified a first couple of projects, focusing primarily on city property first, but also 3 projects that have some connectivity benefits where there are currently no sidewalks. So this is a separate map, separate GIS map, but it shows 2 different potential projects. This is, of course, College Drive and Ridge Road, Pool Street. Here's a swimming pool. So, for example, this green line is a potential sidewalk that is on city property that we would prioritize as needing to get it installed. So we have an ADA accessible route from the bike trail to the entrance of the swimming pool. And then similarly, this blue line here is one that's been identified as kind of a critical connector from a residential neighborhood to the swimming pool, essentially. So I think one of the questions is how to best move forward. Obviously, the ones on city property, we can handle that work. But this, again, is just a couple different projects. This is another one, Phelps Park, a large portion of green here being city responsibility, and then the blue being private sidewalk. So for the private portions, the question is how do we want to move forward with getting these installed. This one is on Division Street here, another connection between what is an existing sidewalk underneath the overpass to Short Street. So again, we have 3 projects, so Division Street, College Drive at Pool Street, and then there's actually a small section in the flats where there's just a sidewalk missing for 2 properties here on Winneshiek Avenue.
That's down at the end of Winnebago Avenue, correct, yeah?
Yeah, sorry, I'm bouncing around. I'm trying to go quick. I can slow down if you'd like, but this blue here, there's no sidewalk currently. The green is actually adjacent to city-owned parcel, and the blue would be private. So the question is how to move forward with these three that we've prioritized as private sidewalks that we feel from our desktop review here would be valuable connectors to complete. And how does council want to move forward with that?
Well, I know I really appreciate the ability to have the city engineer and the people that work with him to be able to look at those and prioritize where they're at in looking to see what sidewalks should be replaced or put in, basically.
And Jeremy, the reason we're doing this now is so that we can have some timely construction work and also staff direction for over winter for potential assessment work. So because the tool wasn't done in order for this construction season completely. So some of this is to be able to knock things out yet this year, and some of this is to get consensus for over the winter work.
So part of it is to be able to get assessments, so we can figure out
Right.
which one you'd work with or how you would work with.
Right.
Yeah, and I did, Ross and I spoke earlier, and I did a little research on what other communities do. It seems like the most common approach is to actually send a letter with a time frame and say, city's determined, as is in the city code, that a sidewalk is warranted here. You have 3 months, 6 months, 11 months, 12 months, whatever it may be to get it done. If not, some of the larger cities actually contract each year with a contractor that will go and install sidewalks for the city for folks that maybe didn't meet those requirements, and that gets assessed from there. So, or kind of like what was proposed at Bruning Edition, where the city does the design, layout, alignment, and
No.
then it assesses on the front end.
Yeah.
But just providing all options. The other thing I want to mention in the Dropbox is actually a code revision. We feel that along with this process, we have some definite updates that are necessary to the code to align with SUDAS, with ADA, with PROAG, because our code is not in compliance with some of those. So just a side note that might be good to do as we're having this larger conversation.
So perhaps, at least for the code revision, for council to go in and take a look at that, and then at the next meeting or in the future.
Yeah, I don't know that we want to dive into that tonight.
No, you don't want to dive.
Those start on page
I don't wanna
207
divide-
of the packet.
I don't want to dive into that tonight.
I'm happy to if you want.
But it'd be interesting as far as moving forward with the assessments of the three projects that,
I think we just need to give staff direction, right, Jeremy?
And we have,
After the follow-up, we have discussed at street committee previously about doing a declining bid or a central bid for sidewalks. What's your recommendation, just so we can provide feedback?
So when you say central bid, what?
Like, we have $45,000 that we put in, and then it's a declining balance, like if the contractor can knock these all out and then we assess. Is that what you were suggesting, or?
I don't know that I'd go that route. I honestly don't have a lot of experience doing that. I don't know if it's like reverse bid, basically,
Yeah.
because you have a set dollar amount.
Keep it
How
under
much
the
can you
42
do- How much
limit.
can you do for this? I don't know, how much does the city want to contribute, because really your code would specify that you can require sidewalks along any city street. But I know that when you assess, there are some, and maybe, I know Travis mentioned this morning, and John.
John's
can
got his
chime in.
light on. He's ready to go.
When you do assess a sidewalk, it's not necessarily an 100% assessment. Is that?
Yeah,
correct?
there's various cases, well, it's actually in chapter 384, that you can only assess proportionally to this special benefit conveyed onto that property. Now, there's no exact definition of that. Supreme Court will say basically every property that you put a sidewalk on is going to have some type of benefit, but then you got to compare that to the benefit to the general public. And the Supreme Court would basically say you can't force an individual property owner to bear the entire cost of a special, of a benefit that's only to the general public. Now, they've also said this doesn't mean you can't 100%, in certain situations, assess 100% of the cost, but so far there has been no guidance on what that situation is. Bottom line is, I think you need to consider for these sidewalk assessments that there is a benefit generally to the general public versus the individual property owner. Again, that doesn't mean the individual property owner can't be assessed. And I think, this is just my educated guess, that the courts would look differently on a construction of a new sidewalk versus repair of an existing sidewalk. And the reason I say it with an existing sidewalk, they've realized some benefit. If they don't improve it, it probably brings down their property value in some regards. But
I think we should also note the fact that this exercise was done in conjunction with the Northeast Iowa Transportation Planner, in conjunction with our ADA compliance plan. So there is public benefit in the fact that we are doing connectivity work for compliance. So because I know our meeting is long, what do we need action on tonight?
So just looking at what other cities do, I guess my suggestion would be to send letters first and require a sidewalk be installed. I think, so just to be clear, the three projects we're talking about is
Yep.
College Drive, which is 2 properties, Winneshiek Avenue, which is 2 properties, and then Division Street, which I was just trying to count real quick, is more than 2.
Yeah.
So when you have a larger project like this, there might be some benefit in us making sure we get the alignment where we want, because there are some existing challenges in the way. But I think the first step, from my perspective, would be to send a letter saying that you have X number of months to, it's been identified as a priority area for sidewalk installation. You have X number of months to get it in. For questions, contact our office and we'll help work through that.
Travis, do we need action on that one then? Or is that just staff direction?
No, I believe it does take formal action of the council, because the way code reads, it says that staff has to, council has to direct that installation. If you give John a second, I'm sure he'll
It does say
probably
possible
shoot
action,
holes
so.
in what I just said, but.
I would like to interject something here at this point in time. I want to commend Jeremy and the people that did all the work on this, but I'm sure I'm in the minority on this. I would like to see our focus be on the sidewalks we currently have that are in great disrepair, some of the areas that are heavily traveled, rather than us focusing on sidewalks that probably have never had one there for 50, 60, 70 years. And now we suddenly want to put sidewalks in those. We have a lot of sidewalks that are heavily used that are in, like I said, in great disrepair, and the focus should be on that as opposed to putting a sidewalk in where we've never had one before.
Kirsten, we did have that discussion today, just so you know, that now that we have a code compliance officer, that conditional enforcement really is a code enforcement issue, not an engineering issue, because we've gathered all that data of things that were negligent, but it was really an enforcement mechanism that we didn't have in place for going back to those places that had been indicated. We just didn't have the horsepower, right? So it's not an either or. I just want you to know.
Plus, I know at least 2 of them are sidewalks that, the one coming down Division, it comes and then it stops. And so you can't continue to go down that one.
2 of those projects,
And then
Winneshiek
the other
Avenue
one's
is
at
the
Winneshiek. And that, there again, there's a sidewalk that goes and then stops.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point, Kirsten. I think these are concurrent goals. We absolutely need to ramp up our inspection and repair of existing. I think it's important to remember that, the federal government has some requirements for ADA accessibility, and so if we identify important arteries or corridors for pedestrian traffic, we, as a city, have an obligation to provide a pedestrian route through that.
And this,
I'm sure I'm in the minority on this, but I just see it as a waste of money and time, but anyway.
I do want to point out, Code Section 1228-100 says the city council may order the construction, repair, or replacement of permanent sidewalks upon any street or court. Then notice the order shall be sent to the owner by certified mail. Notice include the fact the owner may request a hearing with the city engineer/manager, i.e. Jeremy, within 30 days of receipt of the notice. And the owner may further appeal the city council within 45 days of receipt of the notice, but only upon completion of the hearing with the city engineer/manager. So again, construction, repair, or replacement.
I move that we send letters to the connectivity issues that Jeremy raised.
And I also recommend that can I add to that we do our own sidewalks? The ones we recommended.
So I have a motion.
Second.
Was it Ross?
To be clear,
That was me.
which
Okay.
ones are you talking about, Steve?
The division and the Winnebago and
College.
Pool College.
The one
There
going
were
from the
some on
bike trail
Phelps
to
as
the
well,
pool?
right?
Well, there's two of them up there.
Is there one on Phelps?
One on College.
The bike trail to the pool is a city property.
Right.
Phelps is a city
You're talking
property.
about doing that one?
I'm talking about sending letters to the private owners of those three projects.
And then Emily added a friendly
No,
amendment.
I think that there's actually those projects, and then there's also the connectivity. There's two different things,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah, so I want to be clear as to which property owners we're sending these to before we vote.
The private,
The three that Steve mentioned. Those are the three
The people,
Winnebago Avenue.
Division.
Division
Street
Street.
and
and
College
one on
Drive.
College Drive. Okay, further discussion?
I'll just chime in to say that this is a no-brainer. You know, we have children walking in the street to get to the pool. That's stupid. And we should treat that like the emergency it is and not just act like it's fine because it's the way it's been for 50 years.
Okay, roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
No.
Hadley,
aye.
Johnson,
No.
Chisel.
No.
4-3, passes. Okay, closed session, Bank of the West lease. Need a motion
I'd
to
move
go into,
closed session.
motion made by Chisel, seconded by, okay, roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Shoot, we should have skipped over to department head reports and then let them.
Staying here, we going?
I think we,
PM. I have reached out to T-Box to potentially host it in their upstairs. Have not heard back, but I really want to hammer out a location downtown
yes.
so that
What time did you say?
5:30 p.m. There was also a request that it be held after hour later in the day so that they could attend. With that, public participation, that one will be pushed back until October 5th at the farmer's market. And then, final reminder, we've talked about it before, but I'm not going to be here for the September 19th meeting for the ICMA annual conference. That's part of my credentialed manager status.
I have not been to a Bolton and Bank proposal. You think it's okay if I come to the chamber one, or should I go to a public one?
I don't think it'd make any difference, whatever fits for you.
I would, so Bolton and Mink has expressed, you can reach out individually,
Okay, I'll
too.
do that. Okay.
That sentiment was also expressed to the business community, so I would reach out to Bolton and Mink direct.
Okay, thanks.
That's all I have.
Carrie?
Just quickly, I am currently working on the credit card situation in the office. I do have credit card equipment ordered. And then I'm also have a call in to Encode, which is our water software, to see if we can get that online. We might have to do an upgrade of the software, so I'll just have to see where the cost is and see if we can do it this year, or if we have to wait for another year. Also have Groupcast working. I put that email out to you. So the biggest thing now is how to market it correctly. So I am going to be working with Denise. I'm going to reach out to Paul and see the information, get that out there. And we are doing the upgrade to Civic later this month, and that'll let us start working with the Laserfish, where multiple people, including council, can go in and actually see the invoices online instead of the paper copies.
Okay, Randy?
Nothing this evening, Mayor.
Emily?
I have like 30 minutes, just kidding. Absolutely nothing pressing.
Oh. Kirsten?
Nothing for me either. It's mid-meeting at 7:30 in the morning.
I just wanted to echo what Kirsten said earlier regarding the wonderful pilot to permanent experiment on 5th and College. I'll send these comments to Jeremy separately, but again, cross that a couple times a day, 4 times a day on bike, and it feels so much safer every time. So I'm really glad about it.
There was something I was supposed to tell you, and I talked to Jeremy today, and God save me if I can remember what it is. So I will email you all separately.
I retired from Luther College last week, after 38 years of work, and married my daughter off on Friday night last weekend up in the Twin Cities. We did have a Decorah Jobs meeting last week, and it was wonderful, but I won't go into the details tonight. We'll save that for another time.
Hey, I have a real quick feel-good story, okay? So one of the Park and Rec staff goes to the dentist office to get its teeth, whatever. And they're standing there, and as they look out the window, there's a toddler or a young person down the middle of the street, right on the side by the park. They both get up, they go out the side door, they go around. The toddler's making his way over to Fifth Avenue and College Drive. And as it starts to cross, Brian from Wise Buick must have seen him, pulls up, stops in the middle of the road, picks up the toddler, takes him over to the side. And the father comes running through and saying, "Thank God."
I know it.